My demon roommate who loves fried chicken is back in town after his trial in hell. But this time, it's not for a vacation. He's back because someone or something is trying to kill me. Hey everyone, Finn here. It's been a while since I updated you all. It's been a few months, and honestly, I didn't have much to say after Hector left for his trial. I hadn't heard anything from him, and what surprised me was that I hadn't heard anything from anyone or anything else either. It was as if everything supernatural that used to happen around me vanished along with the time we spent together. And even now, I still wonder if it was all real or just some bizarre, delirious fever dream. With Hector gone, I gained a new sense of independence. No more stalkers threatening my life, no more roommate to split a 2-bedroom apartment with. I moved into a smaller, cheaper studio near campus. Living alone was pretty good. I've always liked my privacy, and finally having my own space gave me peace of mind. Things were quiet, but I couldn't say I was happier because of it. Some mornings, I'd wake up expecting to see a box of fried chicken on the kitchen counter, only to feel disappointed when it wasn't there. It turned out that having Hector as a roommate had affected me more than I thought. Getting back to a normal life wasn't as hard as I expected, but saying I didn't miss Hector would be a lie. The saddest part was having no one I could confide in about what had happened. Realistically, no one would believe me if I told them my roommate moved out because he had to return to hell for a trial, judged for crimes by a higher cosmic power. To keep my mind off things, I focused more on my studies. My master's degree in computer science was calling, and it was almost within reach. Recently, I had a week off from school. I initially planned to use this time to study for my midterms, but I received a call from home about my dad. He had hurt his back while chopping wood. Although his life wasn't immediately threatened, he was put under house arrest by the doctor and my overprotective mother. My parents live in another state, in a relatively rural area, and they're getting old. My dad really shouldn't be chopping trees at his age anymore. But he retired early and now sells firewood mostly for fun because he can't stand being idle at home. Of course, I was worried when I heard he was bedridden, so I bought a 7-hour bus ticket to go home. But I never imagined this trip home would be anything but normal. I rang the doorbell of my parents' small cottage. The bus was delayed, so I arrived a few hours late, but it was still only 10:00 a.m., and it took almost 20 minutes to hail an Uber on the map. The town was as slow and quiet as ever. Even the town square was deserted when the bus arrived, a stark contrast to the bustling city where I was studying. Most of the town was old, dusty, and at least a 30-minute drive from the nearest big city. But to me, it was still charming. My parents bought a house in this town when I was in middle school, preparing for retirement because they were tired of the city hustle and wanted to enjoy their old age somewhere quieter. We lived in the city until I went to college, and then they moved out of my childhood home to the countryside. "Oh, Mom's glad you're back, Finn." Mom threw her arms around me as I set my bag down. "How have you been eating? You look thinner." "I've been eating normally, Mom." I hugged her back. It had been months since I'd seen my parents. A snowstorm during the holidays prevented me from going home, so we only FaceTimed for a few hours. My parents had a lavish Christmas dinner, while I sadly ate a microwave frozen meal. My mom always worried about everything, and after that, she sent me several boxes full of fresh vegetables. It was nice to be home, even if this place was truly in the middle of nowhere. "How was the move? Are you all unpacked? Are you eating decent meals or just instant noodles and fast food like always? Are you still in contact with, what's his name, Hector?" My mom started rapid-firing questions, and I didn't want to answer all of them at once. My mom was a talker. I held up my hand. Okay, not yet and not really. I haven't seen him. Let's talk about all that later, Mom. Let me go check on Dad first. He's still in his room, right?" All right. I'll go downstairs and make breakfast for us. You must be starving after that long bus ride." Mom carried my bag into the kitchen, chattering as she went. I walked up to my parents' bedroom, where Dad was lying in bed reading. "Hi, Dad." I knocked on the door. Dad turned his head. "Finn, my boy, how are you doing these days?" He folded his novel, trying to sit up, but it was clear he was struggling. "Lie still, don't try to. I'm fine. Looks like you're the one who isn't well." I sat down on the chair next to the bed. "Yeah," Dad scratched his beard. Guess Mother Nature couldn't stand me chopping trees and selling them for money anymore. Or maybe I should go back to construction. Sorry to be blunt, but no one's going to hire you now. My parents married late and had me even later, so they were older than most of my friends' parents. Besides, Mom would kill you if you went back to that phase of not coming home because of overtime work. You're not wrong there, Dad chuckled softly. I've saved enough for retirement to support your mom and me until I die. Finn, you didn't have to come home. I know you're busy with moving and studying and all. He looked at me apologetically, as if his injury was an inconvenience to my private time. He valued education greatly because he hadn't gone beyond high school, though he still made a living. But he wanted me to have everything he didn't. Don't worry, Dad. If Mom knew I wasn't coming home, she'd raise hell, and I'm on break anyway. I was just planning to do some chores. There's nothing to do here but chop wood and rest, Dad shrugged. The backyard almost merged with a larger patch of woods where he used to work. There was no fence between the yard and the forest, so lost hikers and wild animals occasionally wandered into the neighborhood. I just don't understand how my back hurts. I've been doing this for so long, and it's never been a problem. I chopped that tree down, and immediately my back felt like it broke. Honestly, Dad, you're getting old. I don't take this lightly. The tree can wait. I rubbed his back, muttering. Yeah, but that tree is still out there in the woods. I haven't cut it into smaller pieces yet, and I need to cut it up soon for the new neighbors. They want to have a backyard bonfire barbecue to introduce themselves to the town, so they asked me for some firewood. I promised them premium quality wood. You know I don't break promises. Then let me do it, I offered. I used to help you chop wood before. Do you know how? Dad's quick and firm answer surprised me a little. I don't want you to go alone. I want to go with you. What? I've gone into the woods to chop wood with you countless times. I know how to handle it. I'm not doubting your skill, it's just dangerous. After this back injury, I'm not so sure about going back there. Some very strange things have happened in those woods, and every time I go deeper, I get a creepy feeling. I crossed my arms. You mean those fairy tales you told me when I was little about the haunted forest? You really want me to believe those things? When I was little, Dad used to tell me the woods here were haunted, that hikers and pets disappeared in that area. And honestly, I believed those stories until high school, when the local kids told me it was all made up to keep stoners and drug users from getting high in the woods and littering. Dad shook his head. I'm not talking about those stories. It's true I told them to scare you away from the woods back then, but I had a reason. There's even yellow caution tape that no one crosses because bad things have happened in those woods. People have really gone missing, pets have run in that direction and never returned. If it didn't sound too crazy, I'd tell you my back pain isn't from chopping wood, but from something else. I was no stranger to ghosts or the supernatural, but I was pretty sure Dad was simply overexerting himself. At his age, he was still working too hard. It seemed my dad hadn't realized the purpose of those stories was to deter teenagers from going into the woods to do drugs and litter. Small towns tend to turn baseless rumors into facts. I placed a hand on his shoulder to reassure him. Really, Dad, don't worry, it'll be fine. I just need to avoid the yellow caution tape and not go too far, that's all. Dad still looked uneasy. If your mom knew I let you go alone, she'd kill me, especially into those woods. I sighed. I'm 22 years old. Chopping one tree in an hour or two is something I can do, and Mom will be fine. You're overthinking it. Dad cleared his throat, leaning back onto the bed, probably knowing further argument was futile. All right then, if you insist, be careful out there. After breakfast, I dressed warmly, grabbed an axe and a map Dad drew, and snuck into the woods before Mom could realize I was gone. I hadn't chopped a tree since high school, so the feeling of holding the axe was both strange and familiar. I'd also never gone deep into these woods alone. Dad had always led the way. This time, he gave me a piece of paper with rough directions, and after about 20 minutes of going deeper into the forest, I reached the unfinished work site. The tree had been felled, but was still partially attached to the stump where Dad had cut it. That meant I had to finish cutting it off completely before splitting it into smaller logs. The first thing that struck me as odd was the distinct ring of mushrooms growing around the fallen tree. A fairy ring. I'd read about these in books and folklore, but this was the first time I'd seen one in real life, and it was quite a large ring. It looked interesting. I pulled out my phone, snapped a picture, and then got to work. The second thing that startled me was that all the grass inside the mushroom ring seemed to have died. In fact, everything inside the ring was dead. In these woods, people were allowed to fell dead trees for firewood if they had a permit from the forest ranger. And it seemed my dad had accidentally found this tree while looking for dry wood. That detail alone should have set off alarm bells in my brain. But I guess I was too used to normal life to even consider that this mushroom ring was a harbinger of what was about to happen. As soon as I stepped inside the ring, a cold gust of wind swept through, making me shiver despite my thick jacket. It was indeed cold, but when I walked out here, there was almost no wind. I decided it was just a coincidence, raised the axe, and prepared to chop. But before I could swing it down, I heard a low groan in the distance. I froze, turning around, scrutinizing my surroundings. I saw no one else. Although Dad's map had led me slightly off the main trail, it wasn't too far. I tried to shake off the uneasy feeling, turned back to the tree, and raised the axe again when the groan echoed once more. This time, it was higher pitched. I lowered the axe again. Is someone else here with me? Before I could think, a strong gust of wind swept through the forest, kicking up dust. I had to tightly close my eyes to avoid getting dust in them. I rubbed my eyes, trying to soothe the stinging sensation. But when I opened them, I was no longer standing in the same spot. It felt like someone had just turned off the lights in the entire forest in the blink of an eye, and everything changed too quickly, too abruptly. When I came in, it was still quite bright as it was afternoon. There was no reason for the sky to turn pitch black in a few seconds. The thick canopy covered the sky, blocking any light from the moon or stars. If this darkness was truly due to the sky darkening and not something else, my gut told me this wasn't some strange solar eclipse. I could barely see anything around me. I swallowed hard, pulled out my phone, and turned on the flashlight. The tree I intended to chop was still there, and the structure of the forest was identical to when it was bright. But I no longer saw the mushroom ring around the base of the tree. Strange, this was incredibly bizarre but brought with it a familiar feeling. The exhilaration of encountering supernatural phenomena suddenly returned. Along with it, fear. Every time before, when I encountered such situations, Hector was there. This time, I was alone, no demon roommate to rely on. I had to fend for myself, even without anyone backing me up. I turned slowly, trying to identify my surroundings. I wish I hadn't done that. Midway, my flashlight beam shone directly onto a grotesque creature staring back at me. I don't know how to describe it other than wrong. What made me freeze was its face. If I had to compare, it vaguely resembled a woman's face. If that woman had been severely photoshopped wrong, the eyes were too big for its face, with no pupils or irises, only whites. Its chin was sharply pointed, more so than a human's. Its hairline was almost non-existent, with only a few sparse strands of hair growing from its swollen head. Its mouth curved into a deep V-shape, stretching across its face, like a Glasgow smile pulled wide, looking incredibly eerie. The rest of its body looked like a tree trunk with countless legs, which were limbs of different animals growing out of its sides. Along that tree trunk were warty nodules, and looking closely, I saw faint figures of people and animals with blurry faces on them. It opened its V-shaped mouth, revealing sharp teeth, and let out an inhuman groan, as if emanating from multiple voices at once. It sounded like a mixture of howls, barks, bird calls, and the low groans of both men and women. Damn it! I nearly dropped both my phone and axe, but luckily I managed to calm myself and immediately turned and ran in the opposite direction. I didn't dare look back, but the rustling of leaves behind me told me it was close behind. Running with a phone in one hand and a heavy axe weighing several pounds in the other was torture. But the feeling of death chasing right behind me was enough to keep me going. My visibility was terrible at this point. Even with the flashlight, I couldn't see more than a meter or two. Then I slipped on the loose ground, tumbling down a sinkhole about 6 feet deep. Luckily, I didn't land directly on the axe. I clutched my phone to my chest, trying not to scream in pain, though the fall almost took my breath away. A few seconds later, the creature stopped right at the edge of the hole where I had fallen. But instead of jumping down and tearing into my face, it seemed confused, stomping its many legs on the ground, turning in a bizarre circle. Even with the flashlight shining directly on it, it didn't seem to notice I was right below, slightly lower than the ground. The spider-like shape of the creature, plus its lack of reaction to light, made me think it might not see. Perhaps, like a spider, it only sensed vibrations on the ground and tracked my position that way. And when I fell into the hole, it lost my trail. I didn't dare test this theory by making a sound, so I waited until it swayed and moved far away before I finally dared to breathe a sigh of relief. I didn't feel any alarmingly sharp pain, so I guessed no bones were broken or severe damage done. But the question remained, how to get out of here? I needed to calm down and think. I was gasping for air, both from exertion and the shock. There was a time in my life when I had become almost numb to things no one normally sees, but it had been months since Hector left, and I hadn't encountered anything supernatural during that time. Being suddenly thrown back into this situation was hard to digest. I heard the creature still dragging itself, groaning somewhere in the distance. That meant I wasn't safe yet. I tried to keep as quiet as possible, gripping the axe until my knuckles were white. I didn't know if swinging the axe at it would do any good, but having a weapon was better than being empty-handed. However, I had no intention of climbing out of the hole immediately. I didn't want to get in its way. It seemed to be hunting me, and I didn't want it to find me. Just then, a sharp bang echoed from afar, which I could only describe as a gunshot. The deafening blast reverberated through the forest, loud enough to catch the creature's attention. It groaned and then darted rapidly towards the source of the gunshot. A few seconds later, I slowly shifted into a crouching position, trying my best not to make a sound. It seemed I wasn't the only one in this dark place, but that gunshot had probably bought me some time. I couldn't bother to wonder who or what else was with me in this strange forest. The urgent matter was to avoid that tree spider. The gunshot could wait. I slowly edged up the slope of the hole, trying to climb a little to look around, when I heard something heavy land at the bottom of the hole behind me, and it was rapidly approaching. I immediately braced myself. I wasn't sure if what had just fallen was the creature, as I thought it surely would have run off to find the source of the gunshot, but I wasn't going to take chances. Instinctively, I tightened my grip on the axe, spun around, swung with all my might, closed my eyes, gritted my teeth, and slammed it straight into whatever had landed behind me. "Are you F***ing kidding me?" That voice was too familiar, unmistakable. My eyes snapped open, my mouth agape. Standing before me, with familiar dark circles under his eyes and messy hair, Hector looked more annoyed than hurt, though blood was gushing from where the axe blade was embedded in him. "Damn it, Hector," I yelled, completely stunned by his appearance. Everything felt unreal. "Is that really you? What are you doing here? I thought you were." Hector raised a hand to stop me. "First, could you please remove the axe from my body? It won't kill me, but it still hurts." His dry, sarcastic tone was clear proof. This wasn't a dream. Hector was back. I immediately regained my composure, gripping the axe handle tightly to pull it out of his side. As it came out, a significant amount of blood gushed out, crimson red. I quickly wrapped my arm around his other side to support him. Hector clutched his side, gritting his teeth, but the wound was already beginning to heal at an alarming speed. At his hip was an empty gun holster. This proved that the gunshot earlier was his, fired to lure the creature away. "Sorry, I didn't know it was you," I stammered, unsure what to say. "It's all right, I probably couldn't expect a warmer welcome." Hector shrugged, his face still pale. He winced and bent over. "God, I forgot how fragile humans are," Hector grumbled. "You're lucky I can't die, but you just hit like 3 or 4 vital organs. Nice swing, though, would have cleanly killed anyone else." "What are you doing here? Weren't you being put on trial?" I asked, still confused. Hector quickly put a hand over my mouth, raising his index finger to his lips, signaling silence, looking visibly annoyed that I was speaking loudly. I fell silent, scanning my surroundings to see if the creature was still nearby, but it seemed to have gone far away, probably still lurking to see where the gunshot came from. "Sorry, it's just I haven't heard from you in so long. I have so many questions," I said, lowering my voice. "Yeah, the trial went? Okay. The verdict was a bit annoying. Basically, I'm on probation and have to do a bunch of community service to atone for my crimes. And that's part of the reason I'm back. But I'll tell you later. Let's get out of here first." "Oh, that's great. I'm really glad you're here. You just need to turn into a bigger demon and kill that thing, then we can go home, right?" Hector shook his head. "No way." "Why?" We're in a demon summoning circle. I don't understand why humans call it a fairy ring. It sounds cute and holy, but there's nothing cute about it. This ring was recently set up by another demon. Such rings are only created when a demon wants to lure people inside. Second, once you're in the ring, you're in its territory. Normal laws no longer apply. It's like a different dimension. In short, I can't return to my normal demon form while inside the ring. Great. And I threw away my gun right after firing it to distract the monster, so that's useless now too. You're not making me believe we have a chance of survival here. That doesn't mean I don't have a plan. Hector looked down at his side, patting it. The bleeding had completely stopped, and the wound was already scarring over. What kind of genius demon would I be if I didn't? We just have to be quick. That thing will be back soon. Tell me the plan. I want to get out of here as soon as possible. He laughed heartily. You're definitely not going to like this plan. He was right. I didn't like his plan at all. Okay, the plan is for you to make as much noise as possible, Hector yelled. But I didn't need to do anything. His loud voice alone was enough to alert the creature. It was already charging straight towards me. Its groans seemed to pinpoint my location. At that speed, I found it hard to believe I had ever escaped it. Never mind, looks like you don't need to make any more noise, he yelled back. I could clearly hear that he was amused by the predicament he had put me in. The plan was simple and deadly. I would give the axe to Hector, climb out of the hole, stand close to the edge, act as bait, and then jump aside just as the creature charged. He explained that, just as I suspected, this insected creature couldn't see, so it only sensed vibrations on the ground at the same level as itself. That's why it lost track of me when I slipped into the hole, because the hole was lower than the ground, and it could only feel vibrations on the surface level with its many legs. Its body structure also meant it could only move in one direction at a time, and because it ran so fast, it couldn't stop quickly at the last minute. When I dodged to the side, its momentum would carry it straight into the hole, where Hector would be waiting to swing the axe, provided he had enough strength and aimed accurately to deliver a debilitating blow. There was a chance I would miscalculate the timing and be killed outright, or miss the swing and mess everything up. But it was the only option right now. I know, I yelled back, my limbs stiff with fear. As Hector instructed, I stomped my feet repeatedly on the ground to create more vibrations for it to follow. You'll be fine, just do exactly what I tell you. Easy for Hector to say, he wasn't the one about to get charged head-on by that thing. The monster was closing in, I had to act fast for the plan to succeed. Despite being frozen with fear, I understood the logic. This was probably the only way for us to get out of this damn place alive. Gathering all the courage left in me, I waited until the creature was about 3 feet away from me, then leaped to the side. It hadn't anticipated my sudden dodge. It fell straight into the hole, where Hector swung the axe upwards, striking it just as it was falling. He delivered a clean, swift blow at the junction between the creature's neck and tree-like body. I don't know what kind of force he used, but the monster was decapitated in one blow. It let out a piercing shriek before Hector pushed its body aside and sprang onto the edge of the hole. I was about to bend down to see if it was completely dead when Hector grabbed my arm, pulling me upright. No time to admire my masterful axe swing. Let's get out of here first. We plunged into the darkness. I had no idea which way he was running, but I trusted him to lead us to the exit. And sure enough, within minutes, we were back at the tree, and this time, the mushroom ring reappeared. As soon as I stepped inside the ring, I blinked, and suddenly everything was back to normal. In the instant I blinked, we were back in the forest in broad daylight. It was as if the curtain covering the sky had just been drawn back. Hector pulled me out of the ring, and I saw that the mushrooms making up the ring had turned black and withered. As soon as I was out of the ring, my legs gave out. I gasped for breath, as if I had missed a step. I guess I'll never fully get used to being thrown into such bizarre situations, even though it used to happen quite often. The feeling immediately reminded me of being stuck in that strange purgatorial train station, and Hector coming to save me. See, I told you it would be fine. Hector kicked some of the withered mushrooms and then plopped down next to me. What the hell was that just now? What happened? I was still stunned. You stepped into a demon summoning circle. It's broken now, but a moment ago it was active as hell. Humans call them fairy rings, but they're actually traps used to pull you into a kind of pocket dimension that you can't escape unless you destroy a fundamental element of that space. The thing you saw was the gatekeeper, to prevent you from finding your way back to the ring to escape. It's like a Frankenstein monster made from everything that has died in this area of the forest. People, pets, anything, Hector explained. I swallowed hard, so my dad's fairy tales weren't so far-fetched after all. This place is full of creatures like that, especially in forests or parks where it's easy to get lost. Normally they're harmless, but it seems this one was assigned to guard this specific spot to kill you. It must have been forced to do so. Assigned by whom? Who created this ring? That's why I'm here. I need to find out who created this ring, because whoever did is putting your life in critical danger. Part of my probation is being Daniel's errand boy, and he needs me to ensure your lifespan returns to normal. He has billions of people to look after. This is an emergency, so they allowed me to come up here. Hector pulled a small, dictionary-sized book from his pocket and opened it directly to a specific page. If I hadn't made it in time, you would have died today in that ring and been absorbed, becoming part of that monster. Your original lifespan was much longer than that, so when he saw it being interfered with, Daniel found out. But even though we've escaped the ring, your lifespan has only been extended a little. At most, you have about a week left. The idea that I would be killed within a week sent a chill down my spine. Honestly, I didn't know what to do with that kind of information. It didn't feel real at all. But why? Why would someone try to kill me? I don't know, have you pissed anyone off recently? He asked. I shook my head vigorously. And while I was gone, nothing unusual happened to you either. The only reason those creatures attacked you in the first place was because you signed a contract with me. But when I went to trial, that contract was temporarily voided. No other demon or creature had a reason to approach you because your contract value during that period was 0. Your taste to them was no different from a normal human, no extra seasoning from the contract, like a piece of fried chicken with all the crispy skin and marinade removed, leaving only a bland boiled chicken drumstick. You're only appealing when you have the crispy skin. So that's why my life was peaceful after Hector left. Without the contract's effect, I wasn't any more appetizing to creatures than anyone else, so no one bothered me, at least during his absence. As for being compared to a chicken drumstick, I wasn't sure how to feel about that. But one thing I'm sure of, there's no way your dad went into this ring and came out intact. So this ring must have been set up after his back injury. And listen, Hector glanced at me, his back injury was a complete coincidence. He's in pain because he's old and needs to stop chopping trees for extra cash if he doesn't want to end up in a wheelchair. But whoever set up the ring anticipated that you would go out to help your dad. That's why I think the ring's creator is targeting you. This kind of foresight is difficult without some magic. The ring was definitely erected after your dad left with his bad back. And if that person had enough foresight to calculate this entire chain of events, then someone or something definitely wants you dead. That's creepy detail. I didn't realize you could deduce all that, I said, quite impressed. No, I didn't figure this out, Daniel did. Hector lifted his face from the book, and I realized he had been reading the exact words from it. But it sounds pretty smart, right? I glared. So your community service is playing detective, I said. And specifically, saving my life before the week is up. Roughly, yeah, but besides that, it's good to be back here, you know? Hector patted my back. Hell sucks, the trial dragged on, felt like an eternity. I missed it here, I missed fried chicken. It's a lot more fun here than doing community service down there. Thanks for almost dying so I had an excuse to come back to the mortal world. I gave him a death glare. Hector froze, pulled his hand back, and chuckled awkwardly. Right, I chose the wrong words, my bad. Don't worry, Finn, we'll figure it out like always. Hector stood up, stretched, and then extended a hand to pull me up. But first, let's get out of the forest and back to civilization. I'm starving for fried chicken. My 1-week trip home ended up turning into a fresh series of troubles that I had hoped never to experience again. But in a twisted way, I missed it. Normal life wasn't difficult, but it certainly wasn't as interesting as living with Hector. I just wished everything was happening in a different context. Knowing I was scheduled to die within a week wasn't the most peaceful state of mind. But besides trying not to get killed before the deadline, there was nothing I could do. Perhaps the news hadn't fully sunk in yet, because information like that only becomes real when it's close to the day. Aside from the nagging feeling of the impending death, physically and mentally, I was fine, and I would do everything to reclaim the time that had been cut short. I could only hope Hector would soon find whatever was trying to kill me before my expiration date. And I also hoped Hector would stay, even though this tiny town didn't have a single fried chicken joint. Part 2. Now that we knew we had exactly 1 week to find out who or what was trying to kill me, Hector and I agreed to spend every waking moment tracking down the cause of the death hanging over my head. The hardest part was hiding this from my parents. The problem was, I'd never told my parents much about Hector beyond him being my roommate, an eccentric, socially awkward, and extremely strange guy. Although my parents were quite open-minded, they were still devout people living in the Bible Belt and would certainly not be happy if I told them Hector was a genuine demon from hell. I never thought they'd meet him, but it seemed Hector had nowhere else to go. That meant he'd be my temporary roommate, just like before, only in my parents' house. Just don't do anything weird, that's all I ask, I reiterated as we stepped onto the porch. On the way back from the forest, I had coached Hector on what to say and what not to say in front of my parents. You're here to see what living in a small town is like. Good, you love God and go to church every week. Acceptable, you love fried chicken. Good, you are Father Sanchez, the famous exorcist known for his online demon cleansing services. Absolutely do not mention that you're a demon possessing the body of some poor guy from the 1900s just to explore human culture and escape the boredom of hell. Absolutely not. When am I ever weird? Hector scoffed. Besides, if I could trick your ex-girlfriend and her entire family into believing I was a real priest, I can trick anyone. Just don't open your mouth and say, I'm a demon, or... Mom opened the door before I could finish my sentence, looking quite surprised to see Hector standing next to me. She looked at my ripped clothes from running from the monster and immediately went into worried mode. Finn, you look awful. What happened? Where's the axe? You shouldn't have gone out there alone. And who is this young man? Certainly not a demon, Hector blurted out. Mom looked confused. I just wanted to facepalm. He had one job. I just tripped and fell into a hole, Mom. Technically not a lie. The axe got stuck in the tree trunk. I couldn't pull it out. Anyway, this is Hector, Mom. You know him, my old roommate. It's a pleasure to meet you, ma'am. I'm Hector Sanchez, not to be confused with Father Sanchez, which I most certainly am not. Hector extended his hand to shake my mom's, and she happily took it. Please stop talking, I muttered. Thankfully, my parents and this old-fashioned town were technologically clueless. No one had accidentally stumbled upon Father Sanchez's exorcist hotline website, the online exorcist who made waves. The website was still there from after Hector saved Mabel from being possessed and drained by another demon. But word on the street was that Father Sanchez had been raptured because he'd been missing for so long. If only they knew the truth. Oh, so you're that Hector? His mysterious roommate. What a cute surprise. Come in, dear. It's cold out here. Especially you, dear, wearing only that flimsy jacket. My mom hurried us both inside. I glanced at the hoodie Hector was wearing and remembered that the cold didn't affect him much. A normal person would have frozen to death from hypothermia by now. I think I handled that pretty well, Hector whispered, a triumphant look on his face. No, not at all. I shook my head, following Mom into the dining room where she had already set the table for dinner. The whole house was filled with a warm, pleasant, fragrant aroma. It was already getting dark, meaning we had been in that other dimension longer than I thought. Others might find it hard to transition so quickly from being trapped in a demon's pocket dimension to being safe on Earth. But I was used to unusual things. Dinner's all ready? Finn, why didn't you say you were bringing a friend home? You never tell me anything. Mom called out as she bustled around, putting the remaining food on the table. I only made enough fried chicken and mashed potatoes for 3. You two will have to share. Fried chicken? Hector looked on the verge of tears, hand on his chest. Mrs. Conway, you are perhaps the most beautiful woman on this planet. Mom blushed. I didn't know you were such a charmer, and please call me Louisa. I'm so eager to eat. Hector stared intently at the plate of chicken. My mom absolutely loved it when my friends enjoyed her cooking. If she had the strength, she would have been bouncing with excitement. Inside, I felt like throwing up. Mom, are you okay? If Hector stays for a few days, he wants to consider moving to a small town, and I promised to show him around. Oh, the guest room hasn't been cleaned yet. It's a bit messy because your dad was fixing it before he hurt his back. If you two don't mind sharing a room like before, I don't see any problem. No problem at all, ma'am. We've shared a room before, a few more nights is nothing, Hector said. My mom smiled. Such a good boy, so tell me everything. When did you and Finn meet? How old are you? Where are you from? I have so many questions. Finn never tells me anything. I cleared my throat, cutting her off. Oh, Mom, can Dad eat? Should we bring some food up to him? Ah, yes, I've already prepared a plate of chicken and potatoes to take upstairs. You two go ahead and eat. I'll bring it up to your dad and be right back down. Hector immediately sat down, obeying the command. He grabbed a drumstick and devoured it whole. I slapped his hand. Don't eat like that, please try to be civilized, and stop calling my mom beautiful, it's creepy. I snapped. Sorry, it's been a long time since I had a decent meal. Plus, there's no Popeyes or KFC in hell, though actually, opening a franchise down there would probably be lucrative, Hector shrugged. What about the deep fryer you brought to your trial? Was it confiscated? Thinking back, I probably shouldn't have been deep frying chicken souls in the courtroom while they were interrogating me. I sighed, watching Hector clear the plate. I didn't understand how he could eat so heartily when my life was in direct danger. I wasn't hungry at all. Well, I'm not the one about to die, Hector shrugged. And if you don't want to eat, I'll eat it for you. He reached for a chicken wing on my plate. I glared at him. He reluctantly put it back down. Thinking about it, if you die now, it would violate the terms of our contract because you're currently supplying me with fried chicken. Now that I'm back, the contract is reactivated. That means if you die, I'll be in trouble too. Great, so now we understand each other. Can we please find out what's trying to kill me? Hector pulled out his book, flipping through it. Oh, based on what Daniel deduced, we can narrow down the culprit to within this town's radius. And since I don't sense any active presence of other demons, I'm guessing it's disguised as a human and in hiding. If the summoning circle was set up after your dad left, then it must be somewhere nearby. It shouldn't be hard to track down. This town only has 347 people. We could. I don't know, ask everyone. Hector, we can't go to all 347 people and ask if they want to kill me. Physically, it's impossible. And even if we could, if someone really wanted to kill me, they wouldn't admit it. I sighed. True, but what other options do we have? I'm really at a loss here. Hector rested his chin on his hand. I wasn't trained to be a detective. I thought for a moment, then an idea sparked. Wait, you said that ring was set up recently, right? Yeah, probably a few days ago. If it didn't appear until a few days ago, and my parents have lived here for a while, then wouldn't the person who set up the ring be new to town? If they were already residents, they could have targeted me long ago, and there's no reason for someone local to try and kill me or my family. If they wanted to kill me, they could have done it ages ago. And the person who created the ring has to be a demon. Right, or at least something not of this world. If they're disguised as a human, wouldn't they have to live nearby? Especially since my death deadline is still a week away, they have to be close to me to act. Right. Damn, you're spot on, Hector nodded. So if we want to narrow down the scope, we just need to check the records of who moved into town most recently. But where do we find records? Do we have to ask the government for census data? Honestly, I didn't know how to get a full demographic breakdown of this town. I could Google it, but Google isn't that detailed. What are you two talking about? Mom poked her head into the kitchen, holding an empty cup to get water. Nothing, I replied a little too quickly. Just school stuff. Oh, Hector goes to the same school as you. I never heard you mention it, even though you used to live together. No, we met when I got kicked out of I cut Hector off before he could blurt out anything else stupid. I absolutely would not let Mom and Dad know more than necessary. Mom, before you ask Hector anything else, have any new people moved into town recently? Oh, what's this about now? I'm just asking casually. I heard there are new neighbors, so I was wondering if anyone finally decided to move into this dead town. Ah, yes, there are two lovely ladies, a grandmother and granddaughter, who moved in right next door to us. Heather and Samantha. They're the ones who need the firewood. I remember one or two more people moved into the houses further down, but that's all I know. The ladies at church know the situation better, who comes and goes, but I haven't been to church much lately. Speaking of which, they're having a welcome barbecue tomorrow, and they still don't have firewood. Church, why didn't I think of it sooner? In a small town like this, the best place to get the latest gossip was places like the church. The church ladies always knew everything about everyone. They would surely know who had recently moved in and would undoubtedly be eager to share information. Sorry to interrupt, Mom, but Hector and I need to go to church right away. I mean, tonight. I jumped up, pulling Hector, who looked startled, a half-eaten chicken wing still in his hand. He didn't believe before, but recently some things have happened that made him want to try going to church to see if it suits him. I promised I'd take him to a service before he goes back to the city. Hector looked utterly confused. Mom, on the other hand, beamed, delighted. She had never forced me to be religious or dragged anyone to church, but I knew she always hoped I'd go to church regularly when I grew up. In high school, I gradually stopped because I no longer felt it. It wasn't that I had a problem with religion. I just didn't want to get involved in church drama or listen to sermons I didn't necessarily agree with. The last time I went to church was for Chris, and mostly just to support something he loved. I felt a little guilty for lying to Mom, but I needed to escape her interrogation and keep Mom and Hector as far apart as possible. I was running out of time and didn't have the patience to listen to Mom dig into Hector's entire life story. Oh, wonderful. A lovely Friday evening church activity. All right, I'm free. I can drive you two to church right after dinner. You'll make it for the evening service. Mom dropped us off at the town square where the church was located. She had to go back to take care of Dad, but reminded us that the bus ran until midnight, so we could get home ourselves. I knew Mom really wanted to stay for the service with us, but Dad's bad back was a more pressing matter. As soon as the car left, Hector crossed his arms, frowning. So, what exactly are we doing here? He grumbled, tugging at the shirt I had lent him, which was a bit tight on his larger frame. To look appropriately devout in church, we had to dress nicely, and he only had the hoodie on his back, so he had to wear my clothes. What can a church tell us about your case? Clearly you haven't seen the power of the church gossip circle, I replied casually. If you want the latest information about new movers, this is the best place to find it. No need to bother the government for data. As we entered, the evening service had just begun. Hector and I squeezed through the wooden pews, deliberately sitting near the best-dressed group of middle-aged women, the #1 source of news. I recognized some of them as Mom's friends. They recognized me immediately and gave warm smiles. Well, isn't this Finn Conway? A woman in a white jumpsuit, Janice, stood up and hugged me tightly, then kissed my cheek. She was the regional PTA president and a proud soccer mom with 3 kids. Long time no see. How are Greg and Louisa doing these days? We always told him that chopping trees would sooner or later lead to retribution. Dad's fine, just resting in bed, a bit tired, ma'am, I replied, trying to force out a sweet, southern polite smile. Mom wanted to come, but she had to stay home to take care of Dad. What a shame. We haven't seen her this week. Be sure to tell them to come to church when they're free. And who's this friend of yours? Janice glanced at Hector, openly scrutinizing him from head to toe. Hector seemed amused by my act, nodding in greeting, adjusting his tied-back hair. Yes, this is my old roommate. He just came to see if small-town life suits him. I heard a lot of new people have moved in recently, ma'am. I quickly steered the conversation to the topic I needed before the service began. Oh, not a lot exactly. Only 3 new families in the past 6 months or so, and they're all lovely. One of them is your parents' new neighbor, actually. Oh, really? Yes, they're having a barbecue tomorrow. We're all bringing dishes to contribute to the potluck. Speaking of which, did you see what Barbara put in her fruitcake last time? Absolutely dreadful. Janice rolled her eyes, seeking approval from her friends. It seemed Barbara was the pariah of the week. I feigned shock just as I should. Not fruitcake. I shook my head in horror. Who brings fruitcake to a welcome party for new people and store-bought at that? Truly the work of the devil, Candace, sitting next to Janice, muttered. That stuff is only good for propping up furniture. I hope she doesn't bring it to the party tomorrow. An older woman interjected. Heather and her granddaughter look so sweet and kind, they deserve something better than a Walmart fruitcake. She brought it to Peter and Elaine's welcome party a few weeks ago, and then to Franklin and Vanessa's party last week too. It's like she doesn't know how to make anything else. If you don't know, buy something else decent. Such a terrible welcome. Janice shook her head. I nodded along to play my part. Hector looked amused. He wasn't used to this kind of sweet talk to the face, backstabbing behind the back, a small town and church lady specialty. What's wrong with fruitcake? I heard Hector mutter. Well, wish them luck, I quickly interjected. I didn't want to get caught up in this drama, and I believed these ladies could talk about Barbara's terrible fruitcake all night long. I had work to do. I guess everyone will be at the barbecue tomorrow, ma'am. Of course, you know us, always wanting to properly welcome new people. Your friends should come along too, there'll be plenty of homemade food. The older lady chuckled, and Hector perked up slightly, clearly excited by the words, homemade food. Yes, definitely. Anyway, it looks like the service is about to start, and I left my wallet in the restroom. I need to go get it. See you all tomorrow. We escaped the clutches of the church gossip circle, squeezing back out of the pew. Humans are pretty evil, huh? Hector whispered loudly. I thought demons were bad. Not everyone's like that, I corrected him, but they just gave us the information we need. 3 families moved in within 6 months. The person trying to kill me is definitely one of them. So tomorrow is the perfect opportunity. We'll observe everyone at the party. Hector nodded. Now, I guess all we can do is go home and wait for tomorrow. The bus stop was deserted and too far from the town square. We wanted to call an Uber home, but none were operating. I found it strange that I even managed to hail one when I first arrived in town, especially since this town was full of older people, few of whom use smartphones. The bus stop was in the middle of nowhere, its own version of a desolate place. It was nestled between vast grassy fields and dilapidated, abandoned houses. Civilization was about a 15-minute walk away. The public bus system here was clearly inferior to the city's. That was evident from the yellowed, frayed timetable and the rusty shelter. I had forgotten how frustrating waiting for a bus in a small town could be. They never arrived on time. Even though the route served until 8:15 p.m., we had to wait until 10 p.m. for a bus to arrive. How much longer do we have to wait? It feels like we've been sitting here forever. Hector leaned back against the seat. Honestly, I didn't know how to answer. I sighed. Every now and then I'd peek out to see if there were any headlights, but for the past few hours, only a few small pickups had driven by. Then, after a long, anxious wait, we finally saw the headlights of an old, battered bus approaching. We immediately jumped up, waving to the driver. The bus was empty when we boarded. After paying, Hector and I chose seats near the back. I immediately rested my head against the window, closing my eyes. The fact that I had less than a week to live hadn't truly sunk in yet. It was even stranger to think back and realize how calmly I was taking it. I guess people in this situation would panic or rush to complete their bucket list before dying. But I hadn't truly felt it yet. Maybe I was relying too much on Hector to save me. I had to prepare myself for the possibility that I could really die when that week ended. This was hard to digest. I didn't want to think about it, but I couldn't think of anything else. Knowing for sure that heaven and hell existed at least gave me a spoiler that there was an afterlife, that a higher power existed. But that didn't change the fact that if I died, it would be a permanent change affecting those around me. What made me sad wasn't death itself, but my parents' reaction. After all, they didn't know that heaven and hell were real. They would think death was the end. I wondered if anyone besides my parents would remember me. Perhaps friends from school, and maybe Chris. I wasn't bad at making friends, but I was terrible at keeping in touch. It made me wonder if I had made any impact on anything or anyone while alive. Was death truly the end? Would people post, "Rest in peace," on my Facebook wall? Would anyone attend my funeral? Assuming I didn't die in a shredded state. Had I done anything worth living for? Honestly, I could have contacted my parents more often, not pushed them away so much. I often brushed Mom aside to avoid her interrogating Hector, but from another perspective, that was no different from me trivializing her feelings. I was never good at expressing affection, always thinking, oh, we understand each other. Would I die while my parents still thought I was growing distant from them? Hector lightly nudged my side, pulling me out of my thoughts. What are you thinking about? You look stressed. Oh, how to say this? Just having an existential crisis because I'm dying in a week, something like that. I shrugged, trying to appear nonchalant, as if it was no big deal. Hector crossed his arms. Listen, I know you're worried, but I promised we'd figure it out, and we will. Don't overthink it. Easy for you to say, you're not the one about to die. Yeah, but it would suck if you died too, Hector shrugged. I mean, more than just the contract. You're not that bad compared to the average human. Yeah, there's heaven and hell. That in itself is a whole process. But humans only have one life to live, and you were originally supposed to live much longer before everything went south. We'll fix it. I stared at him. Are you being nice right now? Don't get used to it. He held out his pinky finger. I saw people do this on Netflix. Do humans make contracts like this? I snorted a laugh but still linked my pinky with his. Not a contract, this is how we make promises. But thanks, reassured by Hector, I turned back to look out the window. But this time something suddenly caught my eye. Amidst the grassy fields, dilapidated structures, and starry sky, I saw a familiar waiting station. It was the same bus stop Hector and I had trudged to catch this very bus. Wait, was that the bus stop from earlier? I shot up, pressing my face against the window, looking at the station we had just passed. The normal route couldn't possibly pass the old station again, unless the driver was lost and driving in circles. Huh? Hector leaned in to look, but the station had already passed before he could see it. I only see grass. I leaned back in my seat, feeling uneasy. I must be going crazy, I muttered, turning my head back to look out again. Well, being close to death can do that, Hector said. I tried to close my eyes, forcing myself to think positive thoughts, but I couldn't ignore the strange feeling of seeing the same station again. I hardly ever used the bus here, except for the route from my parents' house to the town square, and most of the time someone drove me. My unfamiliarity with this route, combined with the darkness, made me extremely uneasy. I wasn't used to being out late, especially in such a sparse, desolate place. My anxiety made my eyes fixate on the road ahead. A few minutes later, I saw that station again. It was still the old station where we had boarded. I was certain because the station name was clearly visible on the signpost next to the seat. And this time, the station wasn't empty. A hunched figure, wrapped in a black cloak, sat on the bench, indifferently watching the bus drive by. I was sure I wasn't imagining things. Hector, look! I shook Hector awake, pulling his face towards the window before the station passed again. This time, he clearly saw the station and the shadowy figure sitting there. What the hell? He pressed closer to the glass. That's definitely the same station from earlier. Is this bus driving in circles? Why isn't the driver stopping to pick up that person? I blurted out. They've been sitting there waiting twice and the driver just keeps going. I looked around. There was no one else on the bus besides the driver, so there was no one to ask if they saw anything strange. It was as if the bus was stuck in a loop, passing the same station over and over. The driver couldn't get lost that many times. Something was very wrong, and only Hector and I could see it. Hector glanced at the driver, then looked out the window, and suddenly seemed to realize something important. He quickly pulled out his book. Oh, F***CK? His eyes widened. F***CK, this isn't good. Your death deadline changed again? The book just updated itself without me noticing. It says you're going to die tonight at 10:32 p.m. What? I shot up, my body swaying with the motion of the bus. I grabbed the seat in front of me to steady myself and looked out again, just as the bus passed the old station one more time. The shadowy figure was still sitting there, watching. What time is it now? Hector grabbed my wrist to check his watch. 10:29, we both exclaimed. I only had 3 minutes left. My heart pounded. Hector jumped up, charging straight to the driver. No way this is normal. It has to be the driver. I followed close behind, my ears hearing only the rush of blood. Hey, what the hell is going on? He yelled, grabbing the driver's shoulder. The driver didn't respond, still staring blankly at the road. Hey, I'm talking to you. Hector shook him harder, trying to elicit a response. At that exact moment, the driver slammed his foot on the gas. The bus began to accelerate much faster. This time, as we passed the old station, the hunched figure seemed to raise a hand in farewell before slowly turning and walking away, still hunched. This action sent chills down my spine. The bus lurched violently once more as the driver stomped on the gas again, and a low groan emanated from his throat. The driver's face was a terrifying, unnatural purple. The wrinkles and veins on his neck crackled as if about to explode as he twisted his neck 180 degrees to look at us. His eyes were bloodshot and rolling back into his head. Blood streamed from his eyes, nose, and mouth. Both hands still gripped the steering wheel tightly. His foot pressed the gas pedal to the floor, making the bus reach a speed it should never have achieved. I lost my balance, falling backward onto the floor. Hector also staggered, but managed to cling to the handrail behind the driver's seat. Everything happened too fast. "I'm sorry," the driver wheezed, his mouth full of blood. He tried to turn his pupils to look directly at me, and only me, one last time. His voice was hoarse, like sand grating. The last words he uttered were vague but clear enough for me to understand. "She made me do it." The next few seconds were pure chaos. The driver let go of the steering wheel and slumped back in his seat, his body convulsing as if having a seizure. His head remained twisted towards us while his body tried to face the other direction, making the scene even more horrifying. The bus continued to hurtle forward with the tremendous inertia it had built up in the preceding seconds. A crash was inevitable. The last image I saw before the horrific impact echoed was Hector lunging his entire body towards me. A tremendous force slammed into the side of the bus. I squeezed my eyes shut, bracing myself for the impact at nearly 100 miles per hour. In my dazed shock, I could only think one thing: this was the end. I wouldn't get a chance to say goodbye to anyone. This was it. I was going to die like this. Finn, as I slowly opened my eyes, everything was blurry and dark. I didn't feel any distinct pain in my head, just a dizzying rush, and I realized I was being held like a child in a warm, enveloping embrace. I felt like I was high on drugs. My heart pounded like a drum, my body trembled as if cold, but I wasn't cold at all. On the contrary, I felt warm. Perhaps this was the warmth people talked about feeling when they died. Where was the light at the end of the tunnel? "Finn," I blinked a few times, slowly regaining consciousness. Everything looked upside down. The seats were above me, and I was leaning against something soft and warm. Looking up, I saw a skull with giant horns and an elongated neck looking down at me. I shot up, realizing this was Hector's half-transformed demon form, just as I had seen it when he exorcised the demon possessing Mabel. The soft thing holding me was his furry, black upper body and arms. His lower half was horse-like, with 6 splayed hooved legs, 3 of which were bent and twisted grotesquely after the crash. It seemed he had used his entire body and legs to absorb the impact, and the cost was his body being crushed and mangled. I had seen this form before, but seeing something so unnatural still instilled fear. I quickly patted myself, realizing my hands were trembling. My body struggled to maintain balance in the throes of shock, but I was sure the force of the impact on me had been significantly reduced thanks to Hector's timely lunge. He must have transformed in time to embrace me and bear the brunt of the collision. "No, you're not dead, if you're wondering." Hector's voice sounded strained. He leaned against the shattered window frame. His horns pierced through the broken glass, extending outside. Through it, I saw grass, trees, and debris everywhere outside, proving the driver had swerved off the main road, crashing straight into the forest. My teeth chattered and I slumped down. My body might not have been severely affected, but the shock was unavoidable. "Don't try, just lie there and breathe, you're safe now. I took the full impact, and your death deadline has returned to its original point." Hector reassured me, his giant hands supporting my shoulders. I took a few deep breaths to calm myself. "But it seems the bus driver wasn't the main cause of your death. You still have exactly 1 week." "Forget about that for a moment. Are you okay?" "Yeah, hurts like being run over by a steamroller, but I've endured worse. I'll be fine once I transform back into human form. The driver, however, is not. He's splattered like a pancake. What I don't understand is how he was still operating all this time." "Doubly, what do you mean?" "He was dead long before this bus even arrived. I know because the book just updated his information after the crash. No way a dead person could talk, let alone drive a bus all this time. He wasn't alive." After the initial shock wore off and Hector transformed back into human form, we immediately called 911. The accident scene was horrific, and the driver's body was mangled. The paramedics insisted on taking us to the hospital, even though we were mostly unharmed. They couldn't understand how both of us were still alive and intact. Tests showed we were completely fine, except for the psychological trauma I would have to deal with later. Mom drove 2 towns over to the hospital in a panic, crying uncontrollably by my bedside. She blamed herself for letting us take the bus and thanked God for this miracle. I found it quite ironic that what saved me was a demon, not exactly the hand of God. But my mom would never understand if I told her. The doctors were puzzled, but eventually relieved to see that we were completely unharmed. They called us the Miracle of Gravel Road, after the road the bus was on before it veered off course and crashed into the trees. Fortunately, they didn't ask too many questions or try to rationalize it much. Hector and I played along as if we hadn't consciously registered anything because everything happened too fast. But in reality, we knew exactly what had happened. Afterward, Hector concluded that the driver had indeed been driving in a loop around the bus stop. But we didn't know why, nor did we know the identity of the cloaked figure. My gut told me that figure was involved in more than just waving goodbye. The driver's name was Bob Denver, a 52-year-old single man with no immediate family. He wasn't from town but lived in the suburbs and drove a bus for a living. No one could contact his family or relatives, even in other states, and no one knew what to do with the body. It was sad to think about, but it made me realize that most of my previous worries about death were actually a bit silly. Hector was by my side. My mom was frantic. Dad kept texting to check on me. I felt foolish for ever thinking no one would care if I died. I promised myself I would treat my parents and those around me better. Because no matter how overprotective Mom was and how stubborn Dad could be, they were still my parents and they still loved me. But this still haunted me. Why was the driver in that state? And the she he mentioned, the one who made him do it, who was she? How could he drive while already dead? And if he was dead, how could he utter those last words? Who was the figure sitting at the bus stop, waving goodbye to us before the crash? There were too many questions that Hector and I had to find answers to, and time was running out, so we had to be fast. Part 3. Hector and I were discharged from the hospital after a few hours. After the doctors were sure there was nothing abnormal about us, they reluctantly let us go. Logically, it made no sense. The force of that accident should have easily killed us both. Mom drove us home, chattering nonstop about how relieved she was that we were okay and how our survival was a miracle, especially since the only other person on the bus died so tragically. I still couldn't erase the image of the driver from my mind as I looked out the window at the withered fields receding behind us. Hector insisted, there's no way that driver was alive, but he also admitted that he clearly heard the driver utter a few sentences before crashing the bus into the trees. We concluded that some supernatural force was definitely at play, but we didn't know what exactly. If the driver really was a kind of partially dead being, it sounded a bit like my imagined zombies. It was very late when we got home, and the only thing I wanted to do was crash into bed. I had been through too much in just one day, and everything seemed to hit at once. Mom pulled an old yellow sleeping bag and some extra blankets from the basement for Hector, and he laid them out next to my bed. "Are you sure you don't want the bed?" I asked for the 3rd time that night. My bed was too small for 2, and I was a restless sleeper, so I hesitated to suggest we squeeze in together. I felt a little strange making Hector sleep on the floor, especially since he was a guest in the house. But he seemed fine. He looked funny wearing my pajamas. They were tight and stiff because he was considerably bigger than me. "It's fine, all right. I never sleep, remember?" Hector crawled into the sleeping bag, zipped it up, and wrapped himself in the blankets. "Besides, looking at you, it's clear you need the bed more than I do. This place is actually pretty warm, too." "If you say so." I climbed into bed, burying myself in the familiar soft mattress. It was still the same bed from my childhood home. I felt the heavy, leaden exhaustion melt away as I pulled the blanket up to my chin. "So what are you going to do all night?" "Watch you sleep," he replied casually. "That doesn't sound creepy at all," I retorted acidly. "Look, only one of us needs to sleep to function, and only one of us is scheduled to die by the end of this week. I have to stand guard, don't I? What if some other crazy thing jumps you again? The bus incident was enough. I can't let anything else play peekaboo with you. Hey, I'm not complaining. I appreciate you watching over me, but are you sure you won't get bored? Hector thought for a moment, then reached up. I guess I can multitask. I also want to rewatch some shows. There's no Netflix in hell. Hand over your phone. I rolled my eyes but handed him my unlocked phone. He logged into my account, and I turned my back, trying to sleep. Good night, Hector. Go to sleep. I closed my eyes and almost immediately drifted off. The fatigue permeated my bones, and I guessed the shock from the near-death experience also contributed to the heavy drowsiness. I was a little surprised I could fall asleep so easily, especially when I had such a limited amount of time. But honestly, losing sleep wouldn't help. If I wanted my brain to function normally to solve this puzzle, I needed proper sleep. In fact, I would have stayed asleep if I hadn't been woken by Hector's laughter from below. He kept giggling at every silly joke in the movie he was watching. Hector, honestly, would you please shut up? I mumbled, grabbing a pillow and pressing it over my ears. Hector's giggling stopped abruptly. Sorry, he said, but 10 seconds later, the opening theme music of the series he was watching blared from his phone, and my annoyance flared again. I was an extremely light sleeper. Even a little noise would startle me, and I had already rewatched The Office 3 times. Hearing it now was utterly boring. Please turn it down, I need to sleep, I groaned, squeezing my eyes shut. I had forgotten how thoughtless Hector was as a roommate back then, before he learned a few human manners. Luckily, we hadn't had to share a room before. Let me get your headphones for you, Hector offered, then made more noise rustling out of his sleeping bag. Where? In my jacket downstairs. My voice was muffled by the pillow, but I could still hear Hector's footsteps leaving the room and going downstairs to find the headphones. As he reached the ground floor, I remembered the headphones were actually in the jeans I had tossed on the bedroom floor earlier. I groaned. Wait, Hector, I tried to sit up, but it felt like a heavy stone was pressing directly on my chest. The air was forced out of my lungs. My call was cut short. I tried to move my arms but found them bound by some invisible force. When I opened my eyes, I saw a hunched figure squatting on my chest. I immediately recognized it as the cloaked, hunched figure I had seen at the bus stop. The one who had waved goodbye to me before the bus crashed into the trees. I couldn't clearly make out its facial features, except for a wide, bloody grin full of sharp teeth and a pointed chin, just like old witch drawings. It pointed a gnarled finger with long, sharp, bird-like talons at the center of my forehead. Its fingernails were caked with mud and reeked of decay. You didn't die before. Its voice was thin and reedy. I couldn't tell if it was male or female. I wonder why that is. Why were you protected? It leaned closer to my face, scrutinizing my horrified expression. I was completely unable to move under its weight. Meanwhile, its head made a creepy cracking sound every time it turned. But you will die. It nodded. Oh yes, you will die soon. You will die. 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 It kept repeating the mantra, its voice getting lower and lower until it became a grinding bass sound in my ears. If not for the terrifying tone, it would have sounded like a playground chant. I tried to call Hector, but it was as if the monster was pressing hard on my larynx, blocking all sound. I couldn't make a noise. My whole body was heavy and pressed down by an immense pressure. In a panic, I looked around the room and immediately regretted it. In the corner of the room, I saw a tall, shadowy figure with unusually long limbs. At first, it was bent over, but as soon as I looked back, it slowly straightened up with a creaking sound of bones. Its head was covered in tiny, swirling pupils, triggering my trypophobia. It was so tall it reached the ceiling, then began to slowly walk towards the bed where I and the cloaked figure were. And it wasn't alone. The more I looked around the room, the more shadowy figures of that kind I saw emerging from corners. Black forms of all sizes began to creakily approach my bed. They moved jerkily, like a film reel skipping, sometimes fast, sometimes slow and uneven. I quickly turned my eyes towards the door to avoid facing them, then tried to scream again. Still no sound came out. In my head, I knew very well this must be some form of sleep paralysis. I had heard people often experience sleep paralysis when they were overly tired, but I had never had it before. And I also knew this sleep paralysis wasn't just due to exhaustion, it was too terrifying. I couldn't move, I couldn't speak, I couldn't call for help. And for some reason, I couldn't close my eyes again. I was forced to watch the monster pressing down on me, rambling about my death, while the shadowy figures drew closer. The cloaked figure's voice rose to a reedy shriek again. The shadowy figures began to dance bizarrely, erratically, then held hands in a synchronized, rigid yet disjointed dance around my bed, accompanied by creaking sounds. I tried to tightly close my eyes, but I couldn't tear my gaze away. All I could do was let out a weak whimper as it pulled something sharp from its sleeve. It held the object with its gnarled hands, raising it high above its head, aiming directly at my neck. You will die, you will. Before it could finish its chant and stab me in the neck with whatever it held, Hector kicked the door open and turned on the light. At that exact moment, the cloaked figure spun its head around, letting out a desperate shriek. Both it and the shadowy figures immediately dissolved into dust. The heavy feeling vanished. I shot up, gasping for breath as if I had just been pulled from water. My whole body trembled, my mouth stammered as Hector ran to sit beside the bed, his face full of confusion, not understanding what had just happened. It's the thing from the bus stop, I panted. I saw it before the bus crashed, when the bus was going in circles, and it was just sitting on me. I couldn't move. Calm down, it's probably just sleep paralysis. What you felt wasn't real, it was all in your head. You're exhausted and likely traumatized, so your brain is stressed and making things up. But it felt so real, you don't understand. It was right on top of me. It wasn't real, trust me. It felt too real. I leaned back against the pillow, supporting myself with one hand when I suddenly felt something lumpy under the pillow. Curious, I lifted the pillow and found an old, tattered straw doll with a red string tied in a bow around its neck. It had no face, but where its face should have been, the letters FC were painted in dark red. FC, Finn Conway, my initials. What is this? I trembled, quickly tossing the doll off the bed. It landed with a thud at the foot of the bed. Hector bent down to pick it up and examine it. When did this get here? I didn't feel it before. Where did it come from? Hector pursed his lips, glancing at the window. We need to find out. It took quite a while after that for me to fall back asleep, but eventually I drifted off. I woke up to a loud noise coming from the window. My eyes felt heavy, and a new wave of fatigue washed over me as I struggled to rouse myself from sleep. The harsh light filtering into the room reminded me that it had been bright for a long time. Hector was still sitting in the chair, eyes glued to the screen. You finally woke up. I thought you fell into a coma, Hector said, taking off his headphones. What time is it? I asked, my voice hoarse. Memories of everything that happened last night flooded my mind. Honestly, the fact that I was still seeing daylight today was quite a surprise. Almost 5. The barbecue started half an hour ago. I shot up from bed. 5 p.m., I wasted an entire day of investigation sleeping. Calm down, even if you woke up earlier, you wouldn't have done much. Besides, Hector nodded towards the window, everyone we suspect is already here. I staggered towards the window, from which I could see most of our backyard and half of Heather and Samantha's backyard. I saw my mom chatting with the new neighbors and a few other townspeople. Some I recognized from previous visits, others were complete strangers. Janice and the church ladies were also there, chatting animatedly with Barbara, who was clutching her fruitcake. Not the entire town was present, but it seemed all the most notable people had arrived. After washing my face and changing into clean clothes, Hector and I strolled towards the barbecue area. A group of adults sat around the fire pit, chatting and warming themselves. My mom was among them. Next to her were 2 African-American women, one young, one older, presumably the new neighbors. The younger woman, about my age, was adding logs to the fire and seemed very engaged in the conversation. She saw Hector and me awkwardly standing outside the circle, then stood up and walked over. You must be Finn, right? Your mom just mentioned you, nothing bad, I swear. Come get some food. My chicken is Louisiana soul food, you know. The girl winked playfully as she shook my hand. I'm Samantha Morris, just call me Sam. And this is my grandma, but you can call her Heather or Mrs. Morris, whatever you prefer. We moved here from New Orleans because the air is good for my grandma. Plus, this town has some great filming locations, so I volunteered to stay with her for a while. Oh, and I'm an indie filmmaker, just thought I'd brag a little. Sam prattled on, introducing herself. Her overly friendly energy was a bit overwhelming, especially as her grandma tightly clutched the brooch pinned to her collar, staring intently at Hector and me with old, piercing eyes. Despite this, I tried to smile back as naturally as possible, not letting on that I suspected her of being a potential culprit. I glanced towards Mrs. Morris. She immediately turned away and tightened her grip on her brooch. It seemed she didn't particularly enjoy my presence. Mom stood up and hugged me tightly, her face full of worry. "Finn, are you okay? You didn't have to come out here. You and Hector should stay in your room and rest more." I quickly glanced at Hector, who had silently snuck off to the food table, specifically to the fried chicken platter on the porch. I sighed. "We're fine, Mom. I've told you 100 times we're not hurt." "Yeah, I heard you two were in a bus accident last night. Truly a miracle? How did you both escape?" Sam asked, tossing her braided hair over her shoulder. She pulled out her phone, looking as if she was preparing to take notes. How did you survive? I mean, the driver was practically flattened. At least that's what I heard, yet you two didn't even have a scratch. I'd love to hear that story again." "I mean, it's not that I'm self-hypnotizing, but I'd absolutely love to incorporate this story into my film project." "Samantha," Mrs. Morris's voice was low and sharp, cutting off her granddaughter. Sam immediately fell silent, her face suddenly contrite. "Sorry, your friend is Hector, right? I get too wrapped up in my projects sometimes. You don't have to tell me anything. That experience must have been very traumatic." "It's fine. I mean, we're alive, it could be worse," I shrugged. Sam led us to the chairs around the fire, chatting incessantly about her film project as we walked. We sat down in the empty spots. The fire in the pit crackled with the wind, warming my face. I accidentally sat opposite Mrs. Morris. If looks could kill, I would have died on the spot from her dagger-like glances. "Welcome to the pit," the tall, tanned, muscular man sitting next to me said with a somewhat humorous smile. "Want a s'more?" He offered me a stick with a marshmallow skewered on it. I looked up blankly, waiting for the cracker and chocolate. "Sorry, we finished off the crackers and chocolate already. My name's Peter. My girlfriend Elane and I just moved to town a few weeks ago, planning to build a farm. She's talking to some people over there. You can meet her later." Peter called Elane. She was standing with Janice and her group. Elane turned and waved to us amicably, then turned back to continue her conversation with Janice. "This is a great time to start a farm, and the location is perfect," my mom nodded. "Don't see many young people choosing that path, but it's a solid direction." Hector returned with a plate piled high with food. His mouth was already full of chicken. He looked like he was in his own paradise. "Anything interesting I missed?" he asked, his mouth full. As soon as Mrs. Morris saw Hector, she immediately stood up, still clutching her brooch. She turned and hunched her way back towards the house. Sam panicked, quickly following to assist her, asking if she was okay as they went. Most notably, her gait was distinctly hunched. That was enough to set off all the alarm bells in my head. The cloaked figure I saw was short and hunched exactly like that. Hector and I exchanged a look as if to say, "You saw that too, right?" My mom and Sam surrounded Mrs. Morris, helping her into the house. Sam returned to us a few minutes later, her face saddened. "Sorry everyone, Gram isn't feeling too well. She's been like this lately, a bit weak. I put her to bed and I'll be right back out." "Hope she feels better soon," Hector mumbled. As Sam walked away, Elane approached. "Is everything all right here?" she asked. She was the complete opposite of Peter. Pale skin, slender figure, straight black hair. I couldn't imagine her toiling in the fields like a farmer. "It's fine. Mrs. Morris wasn't feeling well. They took her inside. She's sweet, but she's definitely old. Being out in the cold like this probably isn't good for her, even right next to the fire." Elane shook her head. "I'm Elane, Peter's girlfriend. You two are Finn and Hector, right?" We are," I said, crossing my arms because of the cold. "Sweet," Hector scoffed. "I haven't seen her say a word to anyone so far." I understand what you mean. She is a bit difficult," Peter nodded. "You can't outrun old age, give her some slack. Still, I don't know if we should continue the welcome party when she's so ill. I might head home early. Still a lot of stuff to unpack," Elane said. "Yeah, actually, nobody's really enthusiastic about this welcome anyway. What kind of welcome is this?" Peter turned to us. Elane elbowed him in the side, clearly annoyed. "Why reluctant?" I asked. Peter, don't spread silly rumors. I'm just repeating what I heard. They have a right to know too. He looked at us. Look, the whole town has a lot of mixed opinions about Mrs. Morris and Sam. Sam is kind-hearted. No one has a problem with her. But Mrs. Morris? People say she's involved in voodoo, witchcraft, dark arts not exactly fitting for a religious community like this. Plus, she's incredibly difficult. Voodoo, my blood ran cold. The doll from last night flashed in my mind. Yeah, people also say she moved here because she killed her husband, trying to escape punishment, but no one dares to say anything because she's too old. If she were caught, she'd probably just rot in a closet. Elane shook her head. Nonsense. Do you hear yourself? It's all baseless rumors. You two shouldn't listen to him too much. I'm sure Mrs. Morris is just getting old and finding it hard to express herself. Besides, we're all open-minded, aren't we? She glanced at Peter. He just shrugged. I can't speak for everyone. Anyway, we'll excuse ourselves. You two are welcome to visit once we've finished unpacking. We'd love to have guests, Elane said, then pulled Peter away from the backyard. I wanted to reply that if I was still alive then, but they wouldn't understand. Everything suddenly clicked into place. Voodoo was behind this. I already knew a little about voodoo, and I looked up what I didn't know online. I read that voodoo can involve curses that cause hallucinations and even zombies. That explained why the deceased bus driver was still driving and crashed us into the forest before becoming incapacitated. Perhaps he was acting under orders from Mrs. Morris or Sam, but it was definitely Mrs. Morris now. I growled, seething, and went upstairs. The voodoo doll, the hunched figure, the mushroom ring in the forest. It all reeked of witchcraft and dark arts. But she's ancient, Hector. And Sam made delicious chicken. It doesn't matter, Hector. They're trying to kill me, or one of them is. Or maybe both, I'm not sure, but it all makes sense. They asked for firewood to lure my dad into the forest. When that plan failed, they turned the bus driver into a zombie and made him crash the bus. Then they put the voodoo doll on my bed, giving me death hallucinations. I Googled it. Zombies come from voodoo, curses come from voodoo. It's all dark magic. But voodoo is completely different from our demon stuff. I mean, I don't understand much, but they're like apples and oranges, you can't equate them. Well, there's no other explanation now, and the coincidences are too obvious to ignore. We have to confront her. What are you going to do? Accuse her to death. It's obvious she has maybe a year left to live at most. But she can't die before she kills me. Look, I'm not saying we have to kill her. But at least we can politely ask her to stop trying to kill me before the end of the week, and then we all go our separate ways, like nothing ever happened. As if talking nicely to her would work. If she really did it, why are you so stubborn about not believing it's her? No one else makes more sense. You sound a bit unhinged, blaming a centenarian for all this. And have you looked at your face in the mirror? Your dark circles are even darker than mine. Hector pouted. I mean, you're clearly stressed after everything that's happened, so your mind isn't thinking straight. You might be wrongly accusing an innocent old lady of something she didn't do, and all you're relying on are rumors and a few Google searches. Rumors don't just appear out of nowhere. There's always some truth in them. If you don't believe me, I'll go by myself. What do I have to lose? I'm dying by the end of the week anyway. I concluded stubbornly, but Hector still followed me. As the sun set, we crossed the small yard to Mrs. Morris's house. The house looked even scarier than in the morning. Sam opened the door. Finn, Hector, what are you two doing here? Want some more food? There's plenty inside. Yes, Hector replied immediately. I lightly kicked his shin. No, I said firmly, my voice a little harsher than necessary. We came to talk to your grandma. Gram, Sam looked flustered, hesitating slightly. You need to see her about what? I'll explain later. Where is she? Upstairs in her room, but she's about to go to sleep and it's late. This is very important, urgent. We need to see her right now. I emphasized the word now. Sam frowned slightly at my tone. I even felt a bit embarrassed for speaking so imperiously. But I didn't have much time. I wasn't in the mood to be gentle with someone who might be trying to kill me. Sam led us upstairs to Mrs. Morris's room and knocked gently. Gram, come in. Mrs. Morris's hoarse voice echoed from inside. Sam opened the door and all three of us stepped in, immediately assaulted by the strong smell of incense and a cluttered, colorful room adorned with shrunken heads, intricate masks, jars filled with strange liquids, and old, frayed books. Mrs. Morris was sitting on the bed, reading one of them. "What brings you all here?" She closed the book, glaring at us. "I think you know very well," I said, my voice strained. I had no patience left for her cold demeanor, especially since I was certain she was the one shortening my lifespan. I wasn't going to beat around the bush anymore. "She really doesn't know," Sam interjected. "You two just showed up at our door, we don't know anything." "Well, she'll know soon enough." I crossed my arms. "Samantha, step outside," Mrs. Morris commanded in a lowered voice. "No, Sam, stay. I think you should also know the truth about your grandmother and perhaps about yourself too." I cut in, making Mrs. Morris frown in annoyance. Sam looked anxious. "The truth about us." "Yes, the truth is your grandmother is a witch trying to kill me before the end of this week, and you're her accomplice," I declared, stretching out the latter part for dramatic effect. Hector rubbed his temples. "You sound truly awful," he whispered. Sam frowned. "What? Gram isn't a witch, neither am I." "Or a voodoo priestess, whatever you want to call it," I mumbled. "Voodoo and witchcraft are two entirely different things," Sam retorted. "What are you two even talking about? Don't pretend you don't know anymore. We've figured out your whole game." "Don't drag us into this. To be clear, I also think you're crazy." Hector rolled his eyes. "Okay, fine. I figured out your whole game." "Figured out what game?" "Sam, let them talk. I want to hear it." Mrs. Morris raised a hand, signaling. Sam fell silent. I took the opportunity to recount everything that had happened since the previous day. From the mushroom ring in the forest to the bus accident, the sleep paralysis, and even the rumors about Mrs. Morris's dark past. Having gone this far, I even brought up the fact that Hector was a demon, that I had an unofficial contract with him, and that he had been sent back to this world to try and restore my lifespan to its original number. When I finished, Sam looked at me with a blank stare, but in Mrs. Morris's eyes, a flicker of amusement appeared. "Sounds like a lot of dramatic nonsense," Sam muttered. Gram. Mrs. Morris suddenly burst out laughing. "Why are you laughing?" I snapped, and she just chuckled. I knew right away this boy wasn't human. She stared intently at Hector, crossing her arms. "But I knew because I am human. I know you're human. As for him, it's been a long time since I've seen one like him." "One like him? You know Hector isn't human?" I asked. Hector was equally surprised. "Not human. He's not even a regular ghost that I have to work with. I recognize a demon when I see one. I've fought with them long enough." She reached a hand to touch the brooch at her neck. She gestured for us to come closer. We carefully stepped over the clutter towards her. With trembling hands, she unpinned the brooch from her collar and placed it in our hands. As I looked into the brooch's shiny, mirror-like surface, the first thing I saw was Hector's reflection, not in human form, but in his demon form. Everything else in the brooch looked normal. I took a step back. This brooch was like a mirror reflecting Hector's true form. "That's why I didn't like you at first." Mrs. Morris closed her eyes, leaning back against the headboard. "You are an immortal soul in a body that once belonged to another soul, but you're a special kind, aren't you?" She guessed almost every word correctly. Hector had borrowed the body of Hector Sanchez, a man who died in the 1900s. In return, that man's soul was sent to purgatory. You're not wrong." Hector scratched his chin, trying to avoid saying too much. "Quite impressive. Most humans aren't aware of anything beyond what they call empirical evidence. You know a lot about these things." "Aware since I was young. Spirits are always around me. This is passed down from generation to generation, but with my generation, it's pretty much the end for the women in my family," she sighed. "Samantha, she wasn't meant to inherit our gifts, but her brother, that's enough." Sam snorted. "Besides," Mrs. Morris's face briefly darkened, "I lost my husband to someone like you. 37 years of marriage ripped from my hands. That's probably where the rumors of me killing my husband came from." Hector pursed his lips. "Oh, damn, I can't speak for the rest of them, but I myself am not like them." "I'm not saying you're alike. It's just I have a prejudice against your kind, and you can't blame me. I made many mistakes with voodoo trying to bring my husband back, mistakes that can no longer be fixed." She pointed to her hunched back, as if to say her deformed spine was the consequence of those mistakes. You can't resurrect the dead, and I, more than anyone, should have known that. I'm sorry, Hector said awkwardly. I shot him a glare. Why was he apologizing to someone who might very well be trying to kill me? What if she was making things up to gain sympathy? You didn't kill him, but never mind. Mrs. Morris clasped her hands in her lap, a toothless, ancient smile on her face. So what are you boys planning to do tonight? Kill me. Not yet, Sam cried out, rushing to stand between Hector and her grandmother. You're going to kill my Gram? What? No, that's not it. Listen, she just needs to stop trying to kill him. Hector frantically pointed at me. Kill who? Mrs. Morris still looked bewildered, even though we had been quite explicit. Kill me? We know what you're doing, Mrs. Morris. All those things I just told you prove that you're planning to kill me by the end of the week. The sleep paralysis, the voodoo doll in my room. I pulled the doll from my back pocket and showed it to her. She pulled her glasses from her collar and peered at it intently. I wasn't supposed to die so soon, but something is tampering with my lifespan, and the only suspect is you. You're involved in voodoo, moved here right when my dad broke his back, and you must be the one who built the mushroom ring in the forest. I spoke in a rush. You're going to kill me before the end of the week. First was the bus accident. Now it's whatever you're doing in this room. You're weakening me with curses and sleep paralysis. I don't understand why you want to end my life when I don't even know who you are. But this isn't mine, she cut me off, squinting at the doll, then looking back at us. What? It's not mine. It's not even a real voodoo doll. They forgot the Made in Louisiana tag in the straw. She pulled out a small tag tucked between the strands of straw and handed the doll back to me. Looking closely, the tag indeed said that, along with washing instructions. It was clearly a mass-produced straw doll with a few customized details. No way, it has to be yours. I had hallucinations because of it and I googled voodoo curses. You put it there and cast a spell. I don't know how you got into my room. I couldn't move, and there was that hunched shadow that started telling me I was going to die. And all those shadowy figures. I hesitated. Telling it, I realized the whole thing sounded more like a crazy sleep paralysis episode than solid evidence. Maybe it was just a coincidence. I told you it was sleep paralysis, Hector mumbled. I was visibly annoyed by his "I told you so" attitude, plus the clear feeling that Sam and Mrs. Morris weren't being entirely truthful. Then how do you explain the mushroom ring in the forest, the ring that pulled us into a demon dimension? I have no idea what you're talking about. Voodoo doesn't make those kinds of rings, and besides, I have no reason to curse you, let alone kill you. Things are far more complicated than you two imagine, she sighed, exasperated by my ignorant questions. Then what about the bus accident? The driver was definitely dead, but he was still consciously driving before he was crushed in the accident. That sounds like a voodoo zombie, doesn't it? I persisted stubbornly. That's another common misconception about voodoo. First, voodoo isn't about zombies at all. That part is mostly Haitian voodoo folklore and certainly not something any of us could do. As Graham said, no one can bring back the dead. Sam shook her head, her face saddened. You two are throwing blatant voodoo stereotypes from Hollywood movies at us. It's very disrespectful to a real religion. But what about the firewood and the demon summoning circle, the car crash? The firewood incident was my fault, Sam said. We felt really bad that your dad got hurt because of us, but we really don't know what you're talking about, especially about that ring, whatever. Just because something is supernatural doesn't mean it's voodoo. Graham wouldn't hurt a fly, and what you see in movies or on Google doesn't reflect Graham's religion. But if you still don't believe me, Mrs. Morris spread her arms, go ahead and kill me. See if your book changes its numbers. Sam, Hector, and I all flinched, looking at each other. No, Graham, Sam clutched her grandmother's hand. Why would you say that? It's not necessary. Everyone can see Finn is just foolish and panicking. Hector reassured her. I knew it wasn't her from the start. I bit my lip, a wave of shame and foolishness washing over me. I remained silent, my face burning as I realized all my hypotheses had crumbled, leaving only a pile of baseless accusations. Mrs. Morris lowered her hands. You can't force people to be open-minded, and honestly, I'm old, I don't care anymore. Death isn't far off now. I'm tired, I don't have the energy to correct every person who judges my beliefs. Sam shook her head sadly. We know what everyone in town thinks about Graham. It's obvious in a small, religious town like this. Rumors spread quickly. We were prepared for the backlash before we moved here. But too many people misunderstand voodoo. It's not about zombies, cursing, or voodoo dolls like people imagine. The church people think it's dark magic and demonic, but that's because Hollywood painted it that way. Voodoo is about maintaining balance between ancestral spirits and the surrounding world. You're taking this pretty calmly, Hector observed. I mean, for a human. I've lived in New Orleans my whole life. Encounters with spirits, things beyond comprehension, aren't new. Even though I wasn't chosen to inherit the path like my mom and Graham, I've always firmly believed we can't be the only force in this universe, Sam shrugged. The tension in the air was palpable. I rotated my feet, finally gathering enough courage to speak. I honestly apologize for this misunderstanding. I didn't mean to barge in here and accuse you two like that. Unfortunately, for us, this was the most logical conclusion after everything we'd experienced. To be fair, you did find a voodoo doll under your pillow. If it were me, I'd suspect Graham too, Sam shrugged sympathetically. It's just, I sighed. I'm sorry. Seriously, these past few days have felt like a lifetime. I thought you two were definitely the culprits. Because I wanted things to be simple, I wanted someone to confront and resolve it with. I was stupid. It's okay, I mean, it was quite rude of you to assume we were the culprits without any real evidence. But after what you've been through, it's understandable that you needed someone to blame it all on, Sam said. I don't kill people, and I never will. Doing so would break the balance between ancestors and this world. No reason on earth is worth breaking that balance, Mrs. Morris emphasized. I could only nod silently, my face flushed. If it makes you feel better, this is actually quite out of character for her. Normally, she's gentle as a lamb, Hector added, trying to ease the awkward atmosphere. Out of character? Right. Anyway, this is great material for a short film. Sam's eyes suddenly lit up. The idea of a film project immediately lifted her mood. Finn and Hector, a demon-human duo with a contract, chasing down what's trying to kill Finn. Classic suspects, the next-door neighbors. She began to babble, listing plot points, angles. But we were getting off track. If the culprit wasn't Mrs. Morris, then we still had less than a week to find out who was trying to kill me, and time was ticking fast. Our number one lead was eliminated. Now we had nothing to go on in identifying the real culprit. I don't want to interrupt, but do either of you have any suggestions about what's trying to kill me? I don't suspect you two anymore, but the fact that I only have until the end of the week to live is real, I asked, my voice much lower. Sorry, but we really don't know, Sam looked apologetic. This story sounds insane. I want to help, but I don't know where to start. But I think I can help a little. Actually, I'm quite surprised you two haven't realized yet, especially you. Mrs. Morris tilted her head, looking at Hector. Realized what? He asked. That young man, Peter, he's not human either. He's the same kind as you. Part 4. I was basically living on borrowed time now. Hector and I knew we had to act fast if we wanted to catch Peter before he caught us. Mrs. Morris explained that she knew immediately Peter wasn't human. From the moment he appeared at her door with Elane, carrying a casserole dish to welcome the new neighbors, she felt something was off about Peter and knew he wasn't normal, but at the time she had no reason to believe he was malicious. Besides, no one believed her except Sam, and she wasn't in the habit of meddling in other people's affairs. But to be safe, she had Sam throw the entire casserole away. Sam also recalled that when Peter and Elane first visited, she noticed Elane looked very pale and sickly, a stark contrast to how we saw her at the welcome party. Honestly, her cheekbones were so prominent it was scary. She looked like she hadn't slept in days, even worse than Hector. No offense, buddy. None taken. And Peter, on the other hand, looked perfectly healthy, like he was brimming with energy. When I asked Elane, she said she was busy unpacking and working lately, so she wasn't getting enough sleep, and she also had anemia and forgot to bring her medication. I don't know if that's related, but it probably is, Sam remembered. She then offered to help us in any way she could, but I firmly refused. I didn't want to drag anyone else into this, and I certainly didn't want to be the reason Peter targeted her. Her heart was in the right place, but I couldn't accept. All the gathered information led to one conclusion. This was our last chance to save me before the deadline. We had to kill two birds with one stone. Clearly, Elane was being affected by Peter in some way. Hector guessed Peter had hypnotized her or something similar, as demons could do that, and we also needed to save her. By getting Elane away from Peter, we could get more information about him and end this before he ended me. It sounded good in theory, but execution was the hard part. Hector explained that if Peter was so good at hiding his presence that even Hector couldn't sense his demonic aura, then he was definitely a sophisticated and much more powerful demon. In fact, Hector didn't even understand why Mrs. Morris recognized Peter as a demon while he didn't. Hector and I walked from my parents' house to Elane and Peter's house after getting the address from Sam, who got it from Peter himself when he invited the grandmother and granddaughter over for dinner. It was still very early, the sun just barely peeking over the horizon, but timing was crucial. Sam said Peter claimed he was always at the farmer's market early every weekend morning to get fresh produce and haggle. We weren't sure if that was true, but we had to gamble. If Peter was home, we would confront Elane there. If not, we would take Elane to my house and tell her the truth about Peter. I still don't understand why you're involved with him, Hector muttered as we approached the house. Too many things don't add up. Where did he come from, and why do I know nothing about him? No time to debate now, I snapped. If I'm going to be killed by a supernatural entity, Peter is the only one left who could be involved. He's definitely the key, and he won't give us much time to dilly-dally around here. We have to get him before he gets me. I'm just saying, I know everyone in my realm. If there was a demon like Peter living on Earth for so long, I should have heard some rumors at least. Maybe the tabloid newspapers in hell were slacking off then. That's a good one. Down there, it's all fake news, drives people crazy. Anyway, you're rushing into this without a proper plan. What do you mean? We take Elane, tell her the truth, ask her about Peter's habits and schedule, then ambush him when he's vulnerable. Sounds pretty decent to me. You mean, you want me to do the ambushing because you're a frail human and can't do much? Well, yeah. Thanks for giving me the hardest part then. You expect me to confront a demon by myself. This plan is simple and our only chance anyway. Yeah, fine, I just don't know how you're going to convince Elane. You know how hard humans are to convince about these things. I mean, you yourself were incredibly difficult. It took me saving your rotten hide a few times for you to finally believe me. She'll be the same way. You heard Sam? Elane looked frail and pale. She's being manipulated by Peter without knowing it. I bet deep down she knows she's in danger, she just doesn't know how to ask for help. We'll be her saviors. Hector shrugged. I don't know, buddy, you're jumping to conclusions a bit too far. As I said, no time for arguments now. We reached the front steps. I took a deep breath. Are you ready? I asked. You know what? Come to think of it, I think I did hear something vaguely about a demon escapee on the mortal plane, violating some kind of important law, but I was gone at the time, so I didn't get the details, Hector mused. Demon gossip can wait. Let's stick to the plan for now. I urged him to move away, then rang the doorbell. Oh, hi Finn, what a lovely surprise. Elane opened the door, looking bewildered and a little disoriented to see me on her porch at 6 a.m. She was still in her bathrobe, clearly tired. Hi Elane, sorry, I know it's early and you're probably very confused, but this is urgent. I glanced over her shoulder, checking for any signs of Peter before continuing. Is Peter home? No, Peter's at the farmer's market buying things for today. What's wrong? Elane looked around anxiously, checking if anyone else was with me. To be fair, we probably looked a bit haggard. I hadn't had a good night's sleep in ages. And Hector, even though he wasn't standing next to me right now, always looked like he was about to pass out with his perpetual dark circles. I probably looked a bit like a crazy person. Good then, this is going to sound very sudden, but you have to come with us. Us, Elane repeated, her voice hesitant. Hector sprang down from the rooftop, wincing at the jarring landing. Earlier, I had told him to climb onto the roof to keep an eye out for Peter, just in case he was working in the garden. Yeah, I don't see him around here. We can go now. You okay? He just jumped off my roof. Elane looked from me to the roof, then down at Hector. He's fine, I brushed it off. Not nearly as cool as I thought it would be. I should have just climbed down normally. Hector clutched his leg, slumping to the ground. I rolled my eyes. He'll be fine, I corrected myself. And you're in extreme danger, Elane. You have to come with us immediately. The operation to convince Elane she was in danger and get her to my house was successful. It's crazy how sometimes people just need to see you desperate and urgent enough, and they'll follow. But the operation to prove Peter was a dangerous demon trying to kill me was much harder. After escaping Elaine's house head first, we ran back to my house, dashed upstairs, locked the door, and drew the curtains to ensure Peter couldn't sneak in. We sat Elane down on the bed and began to tell her everything. From when Hector entered my life to this trip home to my parents, to the strange things happening in town, to my death deadline, I thought I was pretty clever with that pun, to confronting Mrs. Morris, and finally, to confirming Peter's true identity. Elane listened in silence, her face expressionless, the atmosphere heavy as she tried to digest all the information I had crammed into her head. You mean Peter is a demon, I finished, and you're also She hesitated, pointing at Hector, a demon too. Yeah, Hector shrugged. So you're basically destined to die in a few days because of my fiancé, a man you hadn't even met before yesterday. Elane asked me pointedly. That's right. And your conversation with Mrs. Morris and Samantha led you to believe that Peter is the only one in this town with a motive to kill you. Right, and I'm supposed to believe all of this. Why? She crossed her arms. I mean, do you realize how insane that sounds? Yes, I know, but Finn. Yes. Sorry, but don't you think it's a bit insensitive to drag me out of my house, make me listen to all this bizarre stuff early in the morning, and completely mess up my schedule for today? Do you realize that in my eyes, the dangerous ones here are you too? You dragged me into a private room, locked the door, and there's a kitchen knife on the table. Elane crossed her arms tighter. I thought I was preparing for a real emergency. That knife is for if something tries to sneak in and kill me in the middle of the night. Look, I know all this sounds crazy, and of course, I understand you're upset and find it hard to believe. But my life is genuinely in danger. You saw Hector jump off your roof without needing a hospital, right? He can do that because he's not like us. He's like Peter. But he doesn't eat people, he only eats chicken. Finn, I think you have a problem, Elane said, her voice a little softer. I understand you're stressed because of all this news, but I know a very good therapist who can help you. If you let me go home, I'll assume you're going through a tough time and refer you to him. I don't have a problem, at least not that kind. We showed you the book, didn't it mean anything to you? Hector had shown her my page in the book, but now I realized the book wasn't necessarily the most convincing evidence. In my eyes, you two could just be making something up with some random book. I growled. We were running out of ways to convince Elane. Strangely, I thought it would be easier to convince her that her fiancé was a demon. Maybe it was because I was too used to these bizarre things that I forgot normal people wouldn't believe such things unless they experienced it themselves. Hector looked almost amused. His face was like, I told you so. All right, I didn't want to have to resort to this, but there's no other way. Hector, what? You'll have to stab yourself. Hector rolled his eyes, then reached for the kitchen knife on the table. Elane watched, horrified. Sorry, what are you two doing? Wincing, Hector plunged the knife straight through his palm, making Elane scream in terror. Then he pulled the knife out, holding his entire palm out for Elane to see. She shrieked, Why did you do that? Elane turned her face away in disgust. Do you two really have to go to such lengths to prove these crazy things? I'm terrified of blood. Please put it away. Just look at it first, Hector grumbled. Elane still turned away, only daring to peek at Hector's palm, where the wound had stopped bleeding and was rapidly closing within seconds. In less than a minute, the wound had completely vanished, leaving only an old bloodstain to show where it had been stabbed. Hector wiped his hand on his jeans. Elane's eyes widened. It had healed so fast, Elane gasped. How are you doing that? Because I can't die in this body. Any physical injury will heal almost immediately, unless it's a different kind of serious. Hector said, placing the knife back on the table. As you can see, I'm a demon, exactly like Finn said. I nodded vigorously. That's why he jumped off your roof without needing an ambulance. But it still hurts. I don't understand how Hawkeye in the Avengers does that without breaking anything. It's impossible in real life. So, do you believe us now? I interrupted Hector's irrelevant rambling, anxiously awaiting Elane's reaction. Elane still hesitated. I mean, that could be a rare medical phenomenon. There are certainly people who heal faster than normal, but it was very fast, it's true. Hector and I looked at each other, both wanting to explode. Her reaction was exactly like mine when I first met Hector. She was grasping at explanations that sounded even more illogical than the truth. Not entirely illogical, but incredibly flimsy given my life was hanging in the balance. I guess I'll have to get run over by a car for her to believe me, Hector said sourly. Or just stab yourself in the heart to make it quick and less troublesome. I shoved the knife back into Hector's hand. Hey, I'm immortal, not immune to pain. It still hurts like hell. You know what hurts like hell? Dying. And that's what I'm about to experience if Elane doesn't believe us and Peter kills us all. Just stab yourself to prove you're fine and let's get this over with. You two don't need to do anything else, Elane panicked. I don't need to see any more gore. Then what other way do I have to prove I'm a demon? Unless you want me to transform into my true form, Hector replied. Wait, why don't you just do that? I asked. I suddenly realized how much easier everything would be if he simply transformed. Elane already knew this much. This could be the final piece to convince her. If she believed demons existed, we could then use that to show her Peter wasn't human. I could, but once I transform, it takes time to transform back. And your parents are probably almost home from the market. My parents are the least of my worries right now, and they're not even here. If they come home, you jump out the window. I'll trash your room if I transform. Remember what happened at Chris's place. They almost died cleaning up. Hector, please, just this once, help me. Oh, because you begged so cutely. Really? No way. You know perfectly well if I transform, I'll destroy your room. How are you going to explain that to your parents? I'll figure that out after I'm alive. I just think you should reconsider before making your parents foot the bill for home repairs. Since when do you care about my parents' home repair bills? Since when do you care about humans? My life is on the line here. It's since I found out your mom has a secret fried chicken recipe that she hasn't even taught you yet. I have to appear as a good future son-in-law in her eyes. Or how about instead of making me do a bunch of stupid tricks, you try listening to me for once? You're not thinking straight, and you're ignoring all my ideas. While I also have some good ones. Secret fried chicken recipe? What does that have to do with anything right now? You're not helping, and I don't have time to come up with a detailed plan. This is the best we've got. While we were still arguing, the doorbell rang downstairs, signaling someone was home. I groaned. Hector paused. Speak of the devil, and he shall appear, must be your parents. Do you want me to go down and greet them in my demon form? He smirked. I rolled my eyes, nodding towards the door. Hector stood up and went downstairs. There was no point in showing Elane Hector's true form right now, with my parents home. That would have to be put off for another time. So no transformation then? Elane asked. Look, I know this is crazy. And at first, I didn't believe any of this either. But you have to trust me, maybe we can drive somewhere secluded and he'll show you. But either way, you're in extreme danger if you stay near Peter. Sorry, but I don't believe that, Elane shook her head. And I have no reason to believe anything you say. You're accusing my fiancé, whom I've known much longer than you, of being a murderous demon. I winced at her accusatory tone. I knew the whole story must sound ridiculous to someone who had never encountered any of this demonic stuff. We've shown you everything, the book, how he heals unnaturally, what more do you need? I pleaded. I think you need help, both you and Hector, and I think it's time I went home. Elane took a deep breath. She stood up abruptly from the bed, looking very upset and hurt. I groaned softly, running my hands through my hair, frustrated. I knew it would be difficult to convince someone like Elane, who had no personal experience with these things, especially since Peter had been a major part of her life for so long. They were engaged, God knows how long. How could I tell someone that their fiancé was a demon trying to kill me? She was right. She didn't know me, and she was sitting in a room with two guys who looked like they hadn't slept in a week, one of whom she just saw stab himself with a kitchen knife. Nothing about this felt safe. But while I was frantically trying to think of new ways to convince Elane that I wasn't crazy, the room lights suddenly went out. Before I could react to the power outage, the doorknob to my room made a familiar creaking sound. I turned around to ask Hector what was taking so long, then realized something was very wrong. Hector hadn't burst in like he usually did. The person outside was fumbling with the doorknob, trying to twist it open. Hector should have had a key. Hector didn't answer. Mom and Dad, still absolute silence. I looked at Elane, she was just as bewildered as I was. Bang, is this another one of your tricks, or? I stared at the doorknob, seeing it stop turning for a moment, but only for a breath. Something outside began pounding violently on the door, twisting the doorknob frantically while hitting. Damn it, grab that bat and hide under the bed, I'll take the knife. I gestured towards my old baseball bat from childhood, leaning against the closet. I grabbed the kitchen knife from the table. Personally, I preferred the bat to the tiny knife, but Elane needed something to defend herself in case things went south. The last thing I wanted was to drag an innocent person into my mess and leave her defenseless. She listened, worry clearly etched on her face. At least she was finally starting to understand something was wrong. The frantic doorknob twisting and pounding continued for a few more seconds, then suddenly went silent. I held my breath. Was it really over? With a strange calm, the doorknob turned a full 90 degrees and an invisible force pushed the door open. My body tensed. It wasn't over. Standing right in the doorway wasn't Hector, but the most unexpected guest. A tiny straw doll, identical to the one I found on my bed the night before. It stood perfectly upright, an impossibility for such a doll, as its straw body was too soft to stand on its own without support. I debated whether to approach it or just jump out the window and take my chances. In horror movies, I would definitely die if I chose to go closer. But standing still wasn't an option either. I took a few cautious steps towards the doll, clutching the knife to my chest. The doll began to shake violently, and cackling laughter echoed through the room, exactly like when I had sleep paralysis, when the monster sat on my chest and screamed, "You will die." My knees trembled, but I tried to use all my remaining strength to stand firm. Without warning, Peter poked his head through the doorway from the edge of the wall, wearing an overly enthusiastic smile. The doll immediately dropped to the floor, face down. I stumbled backward, trying to block the view under the bed as quickly as possible. The distance between me and the person about to kill me was now just one door. "Hello, Finn?" Peter's voice was bright. That smile looked out of place on his face. Too bright, too unnatural, like a mouth wrongly grafted onto a normal face. Creepy, right? My heart pounded. I was facing the person behind my impending death, and Hector wasn't here to help. "Where is he? How did you get in here? Where's Hector?" "Sorry for barging into your room, but it seems you're no stranger to barging into other people's houses, huh?" I swallowed. He knew everything. There was no longer any reason to pretend. "No need for formalities. Do you know where Elane is?" "No," I stammered. Peter's gaze flicked down to the kitchen knife in my hand, then to my trembling hand, then back to me. His smile widened. He knew we were cornered. Am I going to die right here? I wondered inwardly. If Hector wasn't here, it was highly likely Peter had already incapacitated him at the door. That meant I had to fend for myself and for Elane, but I wouldn't lie down and wait to die. "Too bad." Peter slowly revealed his entire body as he stepped fully into the room. His body was a grotesque amalgamation, from an overly long neck to a vast, dark, swollen insect-like torso. His limbs were a jumble of different human parts, fused together by the black, slimy substance that formed his body. He extended an arm, pointing a gnarled finger behind my back, while dripping black, slimy trails onto my bedroom floor. "Because I saw her right there." His words sent a chill down my spine as that forced smile slid off his slimy neck and fell. Then he used his hand to catch it and press it back into the fleshy mass, just like I used to try to press macaroni pasta into Elmer's glue to make collages as a child. Somewhere in the remaining functional part of my brain, I recognized this form was very similar to the monster I saw when I was trapped in the mushroom ring. It was very possible that all the supernatural events I'd encountered this week were related to Peter, and he had used them to test me. But I didn't have time to think further because Peter was slowly oozing fully into the room, leaving huge puddles of black goo on the floor. And I would never let Elane become a victim of something she should never have been involved with. Now I was sure Peter was a threat to Elane, and he had manipulated her in some way. And when he knew everything was exposed, he would want to kill both of us for knowing his secret. I can't let that happen. If I have to sacrifice myself for her safety, perhaps it's worth it. I gritted my teeth, gripping the knife handle, ready to charge. Elane, run! Unfortunately, before I could finish speaking, a force as strong as a hammer slammed into the back of my neck. My vision immediately blurred, the knife flew from my hand, my head hit the ground with a thud, and my whole body collapsed. In a hazy moment, I looked up and saw Elane holding the baseball bat, looking down at me with empty eyes. Why did I never consider Elane was in league with Peter? I tried to stammer out a few bewildered words, then completely blacked out. I felt a sharp, throbbing pain in the back of my neck. My ears rang, and I vaguely remembered waking for a few brief moments, seeing a flash of light, feeling myself being bound tightly in a car trunk, then sinking back into unconsciousness. Getting hit in the back of the head really did feel as disorienting as it looked in movies. I woke up when a bucket of cold water was thrown directly into my face. Coughing and sputtering, I opened my eyes. My vision was initially blurry, but after blinking a few times, I gradually became fully alert. I found myself bound tightly to a wooden cross-shaped rack. Cold water and snot streamed down my face, and I was looking directly into Elane's icy eyes. In her hand was a metal bucket. I tried to look around for an escape route. This place looked exactly like the inside of a barn in a field. I only knew what the inside of a barn looked like because there was a weird period in my life where I watched barnyard movies every night before bed. And the piles of hay were also a very clear sign. However, this barn had no animals. The only living creatures I saw here were me and Elane. How long have I been here? You should try to stay conscious, Elane advised, her voice cold, because this will be the last time you're awake. Around the barn was a jumble of various torture instruments, most covered in what I could only call dried blood. Fear flared up. I reflexively strained against the chains, binding my hands to the wooden plank behind me, but they were as solid as rock. It's useless to do that, Elane tossed the bucket aside. Just sit there and accept it. It's finally time. Why are you doing this? Where's Hector? I demanded, still tensing my body, hoping the chains would loosen even a little. They didn't budge. It has nothing to do with you, she replied, slowly pacing back and forth. It has everything to do with me. At the very least, you should tell me where Hector is after you sneak attacked me with a bat. Elane sighed, twisting her fingers as she walked. He's with Peter. They said they had some unfinished business to resolve. I don't know what exactly. She spoke in a voice that was far too calm for the situation. So it was you all along, behind this attempt to kill me. It was you, I glared. Thinking back, everything made perfect sense. Her hesitation and disbelief in my room was just an act to put Hector and me in a vulnerable position for her and Peter to act. Are you surprised? Of course I'm surprised. I didn't even know who you were. I feel so stupid for believing her bewildered reaction in the room. She knew exactly what she was doing. She was just trying to buy time for Peter to ambush us in a private spot. Away from their house, away from Hector, making it easier to kidnap me. And Hector, God knows what he's doing with him. But why? What did I ever do to you? I'd never even met you before. I tried desperately to get an answer, if only to buy time. Maybe I could think of a way to escape. Don't pretend to be innocent anymore. You know very well what you did. Elane walked towards a large pile of hay in the corner. Elane, I really don't know what you're talking about. Yes, you do, she replied curtly. Can you be more specific? What did I do to offend you or make you want to kill me? I saw a flash of light from something metallic, and my heart involuntarily constricted. Elane had pulled out a very intricate-looking dagger, holding it in her hand, which trembled slightly. The trembling, I quickly realized, she had shown visible nervousness since I woke up. Pacing back and forth, twisting her hands, now holding a knife but unable to stand still. Why would she be uneasy if she was determined to kill me, unless this wasn't truly her intention and Peter was still controlling her? Is Peter making you do this? Elane froze, still facing away from me, her shoulders stiff. That question had hit a nerve. I saw a glimmer of hope. Elane, is Peter forcing you to do something you don't want to do? Is he making you kill me? No, if he was manipulating me in some way, this is my decision. Elane cut me off, her voice suddenly rising. She quickly scanned the barn as if afraid someone might hear, then turned back to me with a sad, helpless look in her eyes. And it's not anyone else's. No one is forcing me into anything. It's my choice, and I don't regret it one bit. If I can bring her back, everything will be worth it. Bring who back? What are you talking about? Elane stepped closer, gripping the dagger hilt so tightly her knuckles turned white. If I wasn't so terrified of being stabbed, I might have seen that she was just as scared as I was. I tried to suppress my terror, not letting it show on my face. My sister. Your sister, I repeated. What does your sister have to do with me? You were the last person she saw, and you dare act like you're innocent. Elane shook her head in disgust. I don't know who your sister is, I retorted. Elane glared. Yes, you do. You're the one who killed her, she said, her voice flat but her eyes burning with fury. What? Elane stepped even closer, her eyes fixed on me. I felt silent waves of hatred emanating from her. You and Hector killed my sister, Amy, and I'm going to bring her back. The end. You and Hector killed my sister, Amy, and I'm going to bring her back, Elane declared, her fingers tightening around the dagger. What? I blinked in disbelief, trying to process each word through the throbbing pain in the back of my head. Amy, my stalker, was her sister. Amy was the reason Hector and I met in the first place. Quick recap. Amy was my stalker from an online game. I married her in-game to boost my character's stats, but to her, it was real. She wouldn't accept rejection, and I had to get a restraining order. When I posted for a roommate on Craigslist, Hector wasn't the only one who knew my address. Amy had snuck into the apartment, gun in hand, about to do terrible things to me when Hector appeared and saved me, accidentally devouring her soul in the process. That's how Hector and I became temporary roommates. And now, ironically, it was the reason I was nearly dead. I never thought Amy had a family. In my mind, she was just a creepy girl living out her fantasies in her room, nothing more. But it was true, even stalkers had families, even relatives close enough to want revenge. Looking closely now, I could see a resemblance to her. Yes, and she wasn't a stalker? Elane frowned deeper, her hand tightening and loosening around the dagger hilt. She was just a little strange, a little withdrawn, but she never wanted to hurt anyone. You lured her to your house, used Hector, then ambushed her. Everything is all wrong. Wait, Elane, it wasn't like that, I insisted. What? You didn't kill her? You're telling me I'm mistaken? I saw everything. Peter showed me everything. Elaine's eyes began to well up. She quickly wiped them away before they spilled down her cheeks. She was my only sister, and I didn't even get a chance to say goodbye because of you. My whole family was still hoping. We just thought she was missing and would come home one day. Until Peter showed me the truth and he said he could help. He's lying to you. We didn't kill anyone. You can still stop now. If you do this, you'll become a murderer. Then we'll be even, she shook her head, then turned and walked away. Wait, I pleaded, but Elane opened the barn door and slammed it shut, bolting it. I was left in darkness, with only the moonlight from the window behind me as the sole light source. A gentle breeze rustled behind my neck, sending chills down my spine. Damn it, damn it, damn it! I bit my lip, trying to find a way out. I was bound so tightly I couldn't move, and my ear started to itch, the most uncomfortable sensation at the worst possible time. Plus, I didn't know when Elane would return or what she would do. I began to consider my options. I could scream for help, but no one would hear me. I could try to use force to break the chains, but the chances of success were probably lower than someone accidentally walking by. I was stuck. Hector was nowhere to be found. That meant this time I truly had to fend for myself, and like a brick hitting my head, I realized how helpless I was. The truth was, I was destined to die by the end of the week. Now it was the end of the week, and we still hadn't found the culprit. This was it. It turned out I would die like this. I closed my eyes. Death was so hard to accept. I hadn't even told my parents I loved them, and they would forever bear the burden of outliving their child. I wondered if anyone was looking for me. Would anyone remember me when I died? Would anyone write, "Rest in peace," on my Facebook wall after the funeral? Would Chris remember me as someone who was lost? Would Hector attend my funeral if he escaped? Finn, you in there? A soft voice echoed amidst my dying thoughts. I blinked. It must be the end, so my mind is starting to hear things. I tensed, bracing myself for the worst. I heard rustling on the hay-covered floor. A few light footsteps approached, and I slowly opened my eyes. From the darkness behind me, Samantha emerged, holding a pair of bolt cutters and grinning widely. "I thought you were dead for a moment there." "Sam," I whispered. Sam was the last person I expected to appear in my final moments. She put a finger to her lips, signaling silence, then began to fiddle with the chains binding me. She used the cutters to snip the lock and quickly aimed them at the padlock that held all the chains together. "Really? Wait, are you on Peter's side? Are you here to kill me?" "What? No," Sam rolled her eyes. "I'm here to save you, you idiot." "How did you what?" I stammered. Graham felt something was wrong when you two left the house," she explained. She knew Peter was bad, but at first she couldn't pinpoint why. Last night she finally understood. She almost fell out of bed in her haste. She said she received a dream, a voodoo dream, where Papa Legba sang in her dream, telling her Peter was the reason she almost died and now he's targeting you and Hector. She was too flustered to give details. But she insisted I bring you here so she could protect you from what happened to her. "What happened to Mrs. Morris?" "Well, when she was young, she tried to bring my grandpa back. That's why she doesn't dare mess with voodoo anymore. He died of lung cancer too young. She was devastated. That's when Peter came to her. He said he could help her bring him back, even showed her a vision of a happy future where she and Grandpa grew old together. He made her believe he was very powerful. Of course, deep down she knew you couldn't bring back the dead. It was wrong, but she still did everything he told her because she wanted to cling to that faint hope. Graham only truly stopped when Peter told her to kill someone so he could try to put Grandpa's soul into that person's body. She knew that was wrong and refused. He wasn't happy about it and tried to kill her. The Loa protected her. She escaped but was never the same after that. That's also what he's doing with Elane. He told her he would bring her sister back, but he can't, at least not in the way she expects. He's deceiving Elane. Graham says things like Peter can only bring back aberrations. Anyway, I was on my way to your house to warn you when I saw Peter and Elane dragging you and Hector into a car. I thought, that can't be good. So I followed from a distance. "I can't believe you actually managed to follow us all the way here without being noticed," I remarked. "Where is this place?" "I think this is Peter's farm. It's in the middle of nowhere, nothing nearby, not like he described. There's not much in the fields, just a pile of hay, this barn, and another shed. And did you just happen to bring this with you?" I nodded towards the bolt cutters. "Yeah, my toolkit is in the car. Big Bertha keeps acting up, so I always keep my tools in the back in case she breaks down in the middle of the road. And bolt cutters are surprisingly useful." Sam tensed, and I heard a click. The lock was cut. She quickly removed the chains. Luckily, they were all connected by a single lock, so removing one point freed all the chains instead of having to cut each link. "I think you just saved my life, Sam." Released, I gave her a tight hug to seriously thank her. "You're welcome." Sam slung the bolt cutters over her shoulder, her other hand on her hip. Graham's biggest regret is the mistake she made decades ago, and she told everyone her back got bad from falling off a ladder, but it was actually caused by Peter. I want to make sure she gets closure on that, and this is how. Sam reached into her pocket and pulled out a brooch, the same blue brooch Mrs. Morris wore on her collar. Looking closely, an intricate symbol was carved into its gleaming surface. "Jewelry." "An amulet," Sam corrected. "It's the seal of the Loa Agun, the warrior god and protector. Graham told me to bring it. She said it protected her all these years, and now it will protect us. She said creatures like Peter can't be killed, but they can be sealed away. That's the only way to deal with him, and he knows this is a real threat. We have to find Hector first. He's somewhere around here too, but I don't know exactly where." Suddenly, whispers came from outside the barn door. "Did you hear something?" A man's voice softly asked, accompanied by the rattling of a lock. My eyes widened. Someone's coming. Sam reacted incredibly fast, grabbing my hand and pulling me back, stuffing both of us behind a pile of hay at the back of the barn. Just as we ducked in, the barn door opened, and I saw two long shadows cast by the light. No, where is it?" Peter growled, his anger palpable. From behind the hay, I could distinguish Peter's and Elane's voices, though I couldn't see their faces clearly. All friendliness in Peter's voice had vanished. How did it escape? I don't know. I was sure it was still here when I left. I don't understand how it could have gotten out of the chains. I heard a loud slap, then a thud on the ground. Elane had been slapped and fallen. You just had to keep it here. I gave you one job, Peter yelled. Hector must have escaped on his own. Hector must have freed himself, Elane said, her voice clearly trembling. That's the only explanation. Impossible. I was in the shed with Hector the whole time. Peter shook his head. There must be a rat in here. Sorry, I'll tell the others to search around here, she stammered. Sam and I exchanged wide-eyed glances. The others, there are more people here. Don't let them near the shed, Peter growled, each word distinct. I need to check on some things. Meet me back here in 10 minutes. But Peter, I did everything you asked. I paid the full price. We found Finn and Hector. When are you bringing Amy back? There was a silence, then a terrified gasp. Listen, child, Peter immediately cut off Elane. I guessed he was strangling her because then I heard her gasp as if suffocating. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw her feet dangling above the ground. His voice now sounded hoarse and distorted, as if many people were speaking at once. I don't know why you think you have the right to call me Peter when we're not in public, but you'd best shut your mouth and do as you're told. Your work is far from over. I can bring her back, but I can just as easily send you to where she is. Never question me. Understand? Elane nodded frantically. He let go, she fell with a thud, then scrambled to her feet. The door slammed shut again, the chain dragged across it. Sam and I slowly stood up from behind the hay. What the hell was that? Sam whispered, stunned. This is bad. How are we going to get out of here if there are people wandering around? I muttered. I swear I didn't see anyone when I got here, but no time to think about it now. Sam grabbed my hand, pulling me towards the window she had climbed through, then began piling hay up beneath it. What are you doing? You heard him. He said Hector's in the shed. It's just a few steps away. So you have to go there, but you just have to go, Finn, she whispered forcefully, pushing me onto the hay pile. You worry too much. They'll be back soon. If we stay here, we're dead. Staying here won't do any good. All right, all right. I shook my head, beginning to climb. I poked my head out the window frame. From this angle, I could see most of the farm and the shed in the distance. Just as Peter said, several figures were spread out, searching the fields, scattered everywhere. They wore white cloaks with hoods and carried flashlights, making them quite recognizable. But they moved very slowly, without any sense of urgency. Strange, because if it were me looking for someone I had just kidnapped, I'd be moving very fast. Some were even crawling on all fours, which was even stranger. There are a bunch of people outside. I turned back to tell Sam. She frowned. Yeah, they look like church people, or rather some kind of cult, I'm not sure, I stammered. They're everywhere, and some are crawling on all fours. It's disgusting. I ducked back down into the shaky hay pile. Either way, if I jump out now, I'll get caught immediately. Then we'll distract them, she said, then stood up. I'll run to the door and bang on it a few times. That'll draw them all to the front. You wait until you're sure no one is on the side, then jump out. What about you? I asked. If Peter comes back, I'll be right behind you, Sam asserted, pushing me towards the window. Go! With that, she ran straight to the barn door. As she pounded on the door, I peeked out again, seeing the white-cloaked figures shuffling around to the front of the barn. Waiting until the last one disappeared around the corner, I grabbed the wooden frame, climbed out, and jumped down, landing with a thud on the hay pile Sam had used to climb into the barn earlier. I saw the shed in the distance and had no time to linger or wonder if the hooded figures had seen me. I ran headlong towards it at full speed, my shoes crunching on the dry leaves beneath. I almost crashed into the door, frantically rattling the rusty doorknob before realizing it was locked. I tugged a few more times, then stepped back, delivering a powerful kick right at the doorknob. The door flew open. Hector was indeed inside, but not the Hector I wanted to see, and I had to admit, it had been a long time since I'd seen him in his true form, so freezing was understandable. The last time I saw him in this full form was when he exorcised the demon possessing my ex-girlfriend's sister, Mabel. Now, no part of him resembled a human. His face was actually an ancient, cracked skull with giant horns growing from the top. His jaw was dog-like, covered in a sticky black substance. His teeth were jagged, looking chipped after some altercation with Peter. His long, shaggy neck connected to a massive, black-furred humanoid upper body. His lower half was always the most terrifying part to me. The upper part could be vaguely mistaken for someone in a costume, but the bottom was entirely inhuman. A deep hole in his stomach spewed black smoke, a color only slightly lighter than the dark black fur around it. Instead of 2 legs, he had 5 long, spindly legs that looked more like horse legs than human. His 6th limb was gone, oozing thick black goo. Faint moonlight filtering through a tiny window showed his 2 wrists bent grotesquely, shackled to the wall with what looked like giant handcuffs. But worse, he wasn't alone. The cloaked figure standing in front of Hector, who was unconscious, was bent at unnatural angles, his back arched, revealing a pale purple inverted face. It was exactly like Bob Denver, the bus driver who nearly killed me in the accident a few days ago. His eyes were bloodshot, and the veins on his face and neck were abnormally swollen. But he wasn't the only one in the room with dark purple skin and bulging blue veins. In the moonlight, I saw many white-cloaked figures shackled to the wall, each in a different state. Some groaned, gritting their teeth, others were limp. The entire cloaked figure began to slowly turn to face me, shuffling backward, its spine cracking and compressing so it could stand upright, its face turning the correct way. From its throat, a low, guttural growl escaped. It staggered towards me. I glanced behind me, seeing no sign of Sam. Looking forward, Hector was still motionless. It was just me and this monstrous form that I wasn't even sure I should call human anymore. "Please," I said, backing away. "I don't want to fight." He growled again, the vibrations dislocating his jaw. Now his mouth hung wide open, still shuffling awkwardly towards me. I jumped to the side, dodging him. Luckily, he wasn't moving faster than 2 or 3 miles per hour, so I had time to rush to Hector, grabbing him and shaking him. "Hector, Hector," I called frantically. Now would be a great time to wake up. Silence. I grabbed his upper body, shaking him with all my might, but he was as heavy as a mountain. I shook him harder, still no movement. I was truly out of patience. "Hector, we're in a shed full of zombie-like things, and Peter could be here any minute. Waking up would really be helpful right now," I yelled, my voice almost breaking. While the cloaked shadow changed direction and crawled towards me, my mind raced to think of a way to bring Hector back to reality, because clearly violence wasn't working. What could pull an unconscious Hector back to the living? What could be offensive enough to shock him out of his stupor? The Trump administration shut down all KFCs for hygiene reasons and replaced them all with sweet green salad chains, I blurted out. His tail twitched slightly, but even that wasn't enough. His skull remained slumped on his long neck. I jumped aside again, falling with a thud as the cloaked shadow lunged, hearing a few bones crack. I winced, seeing him start to get up again, though his elbow bone was clearly protruding. Seeing the cloaked shadow lumbering towards me again, I closed my eyes, resigned to doing the most humiliating thing in my life. Amidst my panic, I remembered how much Hector hated Nickelback. It was a constant argument between us. He even made a rule that I wasn't allowed to play their music in the apartment. I hoped Nickelback, combined with my terrible singing voice, would be annoying enough to pull him out of his trance. "Look at this photograph." I hadn't sung properly in years, and it showed. I pushed everything else aside to focus on extracting the lyrics to Nickelback's Photograph. Every time I do, it makes me laugh. How did our eyes get so red? And almost immediately, I heard a loud asterisk crack as Hector's hand broke free from its shackles. He grabbed the cloaked figure's neck, threw him to the other side of the shed, where he crashed into the other cloaked figures. He groaned, convulsed for a moment, then went silent. I turned to Hector, seeing his other hand also tear free from its shackles. The cuff still dangled from his wrist, a large chunk of the wall crumbling with it. "I know you did that to wake me up, but if you ever sing that stuff in front of me again, I will personally kill you myself." "Well, it worked, didn't it?" I laughed, relieved, feeling much lighter. Hector fumbled around his body a few times, then touched his skull. "Are you okay? Why are you like this?" I pointed at his entire body. "That bastard must have ambushed me. The last thing I remember is opening your door, thinking it was your parents, but it was him. Then I passed out. And when I'm unconscious, I can't maintain human form." He rolled his eyes, looking around, confused to see the white-cloaked figures shackled to the walls. "What the hell is going on here?" "I don't know, but that guy you just threw over there, I guess he was guarding you, and I think you just killed him." "Impossible, that guy's already dead." Hector crossed his arms. There's no human soul in there anymore. But he was moving and making noises, just like the bus driver the other day. I protested. That bus driver was also dead. You mean they're zombies? No, zombies don't exist. No one is allowed to bring back the dead in any way. That's the one law everyone has to respect, whether it's a demon or something else. Demons can possess living people, but we don't meddle with life and death. Then how do you explain it? Let's argue about this later. I shook my head vigorously. We have to get out of here. We have to find Sam and run. Sam, our neighbor Sam, she followed us here and unlocked my chains. If it weren't for her, I'd still be hanging in that barn. I hesitated. The fact that she hasn't come here yet is not a good sign. She said she'd be right behind me. No, we're not going back for her. Now we run. What? We can't just leave her. Listen, I'm out of juice. I've been in this form too long. I can't even fight a rabbit right now. And since when am I responsible for anyone else's soul besides yours? Since she saved my life from that barn. Oh, convenient. Everyone gathers in one place just like this. Both of us spun towards the voice. I instinctively hid behind Hector. Standing in the doorway was Peter. Not the Peter we saw at the barbecue, but a pale, slimy mass of flesh with countless sunken faces peeking out from its surface. Dragging behind the fleshy mass was an unconscious Sam. The mass tossed Sam aside like a sack of rice. I lunged to catch her before she hit the ground. Sam! I gently slapped her cheek to rouse her, but it was no use. She's fine, just unconscious. Peter's face slowly emerged from the fleshy mass. Strangely, he looked older, more hollowed out. He opened his eyes, revealing 2 empty sockets, and grinned widely. I pulled Sam behind me, shielding her from his view. I usually exterminate vermin, he said. You know, any rat that doesn't serve the experiment should be considered a parasite. But this time, I'll just give her a few nightmares. Heather Morris's descendants aren't worth my judgment. And I usually crush disgusting things like you, but it seems tonight we all have to break our habits, Hector retorted. I'm afraid I don't think you have enough strength to crush me, Peter sneered. I glanced at Hector, worried. And I know your tricks. Those visions don't work on me anymore, Hector continued. I remember who you are. All this time we've been looking in the wrong direction. The fairy ring and sleep paralysis weren't some random demon's tricks. It was you. You escaped centuries ago after being tried for a bunch of crimes related to breaking the boundary of life and death. We all must sacrifice for science, Finn. Peter extended a hand towards me. I'm actually more of a friend to you than you think. I don't think friends shackle each other in a cattle barn and leave them to die of thirst. I simply point out that sometimes, to gain knowledge, we must do things we don't want to. Humans like to tinker with science, don't they? I am also a scientist in my own way, Peter mused. For centuries, I've experimented with immortality. Why should humans live shorter lives than other species? Humans constantly worry about aging, about dying. All conflict in the world stems from the struggle over who gets to live and who gets to die. Imagine if the problem of mortality no longer existed. No wars, no sorrow, no meaningless deaths. Your society would be completely different. But no one asked you to, I argued. For years, I tried everything, Peter continued, ignoring me. And as I said, I failed many times. But failure brings knowledge. This fleshy form is an honor, a monument to all those who have aided my research over the years. All my failed experiments coalesced into one body so that we Asterisk could collectively pursue the unknown. We've tried everything, rewriting destinies in books, extending souls artificially. Most recently, we managed to cram the souls of lower animals into newly dead human bodies, like this. The bodies shackled to the wall began to convulse. My heart sank as I remembered the bus driver and the cloaked figure who had pursued me minutes ago. I realized they were just shells containing animal souls. No wonder they couldn't speak, crawling and moving jerkily. This was worse than zombies. They weren't human anymore. That's not science, that's desecrating the dead, Hector said. And don't pretend you cherish the people you devour. In the end, you just want to consume. You can't live without swallowing people. You'd be surprised how easily humans follow me. All I have to do is promise immortality or something similar, especially easy when they've just lost a loved one. I tell them I can bring that person back, plant a few images in their minds, and they believe me wholeheartedly, like a miracle. They believe I am a higher being, everything I say, and indeed I am higher, and they will forever be a part of me for their loyalty. Peter stroked a face on his surface, giving me goosebumps. You're doing all this just for yourself, playing God, I said in disgust. Yes, Peter smiled, his mouth impossibly wide. But this isn't a game. I'm almost in control of life and death. I am the closest thing to God besides God himself. Then why target Finn? I asked. He was never the main target. He turned to look at Hector. My target is you, a demon who can infuse his soul into a human body, in return sending that human soul to purgatory, not hell. If you can enter a newly dead human body, then I can find a way to recycle souls for them to live again and again. So the answer is, I just wanted to get your attention, and the surest way to do that was to threaten your only weakness, the contract between you and Finn Conway. You only received a pardon because of that contract. Losing Finn means losing your chance at freedom, and you would undoubtedly report me at the first opportunity to lessen your sentence. This way, I can bring you to me on my terms. A like-minded lawbreaker. So I was just bait, I whispered. He used my life to lure Hector. I was just a guinea pig. If I died, it was just a means to an end. Hearing that, my death suddenly lost all meaning. After all, Peter had no reason to target me specifically. There's no other way. I need to dissect Hector to understand how he does that. Hector is the last missing piece of my research. As Peter rambled, I noticed a very slight movement at the door. The moonlight cast a shadow of someone just outside the frame, obscured by the doorway. In the corner of the frame, I saw Elane's shoe. I don't know how long she had been standing there, but this was the perfect time to shatter the misconceptions in her head and buy some time. Circling back to Elane for a moment, I blurted out. The shoe quickly retreated, leaving no doubt Elane was standing there, and Peter didn't know it. You told Elane you would help her reunite with her sister, right? Indeed, he said. But let's assume your experiments actually work. Theoretically, you can only do that if there's a physical body. Amy's body was completely consumed. You lied to Elane. Of course I lied. Amy Anderson's body has been gone for a long time. Elane is foolish for believing me, but as I said, desperate people will believe anything. What? The fleshy mass spun around, its rippling surface leaning heavily towards the door. Seeing Elane step out, her hands trembling as she held the knife. She took another step, her eyes wide, her body shaking. You lied to me, Elane whimpered, her knuckles white. After everything I've done for you. I told you not to come near the shed, Peter growled. Don't you dare blame me, Elane screamed. I heard everything. Where's Amy? You said you'd bring her back, so where is she? While Elane used her tears and anger to assault Peter, I seized the opportunity to search Sam's jacket pockets. Now is not the time for fumbling around. Hector whispered as Peter began to justify himself by bringing up Hector's crimes. I don't have it. Sam said Mrs. Morris gave her something, some kind of amulet. She said the only way to stop Peter was to seal him away. I finally found the brooch and pulled it out. Demons of that level don't die easily. Sealing is the most logical option, Hector observed, leaning closer to examine the brooch. He immediately recoiled. Get that thing away from me. Just a light touch is enough to suck any demon right in. I don't know where that old lady dug up something so dangerous, but it's enough to seal him away forever. She wore it all the time since we met. If I had been careless then, I'd be toast. Another thought flashed in my mind. Let me go. I turned towards the scream and almost threw up at the sight. Peter was embracing Elane, but there was nothing affectionate about it. The massive fleshy body was wrapping around her, slowly consuming her. Elane tried to stab the fleshy mass with the knife, but her hand slipped, and the knife plunged into the ground. She turned back, her eyes pleading for help towards us, crying and struggling amidst the flesh. Disobedience is not permitted. Peter's voice came out in distorted, broken fragments as more and more flesh wrapped around Elane. I gently put Sam down and stood up, but Hector grabbed my shoulder. If you touch him, he'll swallow you too. It's like quicksand, it almost pulled me in. I had to cut off my own leg. He pointed to his missing leg. If he had swallowed me whole, I'd be in that pile of flesh right now. We should run. I still have enough strength. Just follow me, all right. What? I whispered, cutting him off. Hector, this isn't right. I suddenly raised my voice. I held the brooch up, glanced at him, then looked up at Hector, hoping he would understand my meaning. Huh? He didn't understand, I sighed. I'm so tired of running, tired of you dragging me into these things, always treating my life as something to play with. I'm not immortal. I'm just a student trying to finish his master's degree. Sam just wants to get her film on screen. Elane just wants to find a way to cope with losing her sister. All of this has to stop. I'm tired of facing these life-or-death situations. Peter's face contorted, turning towards me. The process of consuming Elane paused for a moment. She still struggled but couldn't move. I held the brooch higher for him to see. Peter froze. The seal of the Loa Agun. You said you needed Hector, but you won't be able to talk to him if he's sealed away permanently. And right now, he doesn't have the strength to fight anyone else, does he? You're bluffing. No way that's real. In this town, where would you get anything related to voodoo or? He stopped, his eyes wide, then narrowed in anger. Heather Morris. Hector looked at me, astonished. Hey, what the hell are you doing? He stammered, backing away. Clearly, the brooch scared him, but I had no intention of using it on him. Hector's genuine panic seemed to make Peter hesitate too, as he stopped consuming Elane. That will seal you away forever and end all of this. I swung my arm back, pretending to throw the brooch directly at Hector. He instinctively raised his hands to cover his face. No. Peter's fleshy mass immediately spat Elane out, lunging to grab my wrist. The mass of flesh wrapped tightly around my wrist with such force that my bones cracked. My hand went limp, the brooch fell and was swallowed by the flesh in the process. For a moment, his face radiated triumph, then it contorted into primal panic. All the faces on the fleshy mass simultaneously opened their eyes and let out a deep, horrified shriek. The flesh around my wrist loosened. I yanked my hand back, watching the entire fleshy mass begin to convulse violently. The slimy blob, like a giant brain, melted around the spot where the brooch had just disappeared into his skin. Each face also liquefied. The faces piled on top of each other, the voice of the fleshy mass sometimes screaming for revenge, sometimes pleading, until the sound slowly turned into meaningless groans, finally becoming only a roar of pain. Hector scrambled to his feet, slung Sam over his shoulder, pulled Elane with one hand and grabbed me with the other, limping towards the door. He crashed through the door frame just as fire erupted around where the brooch had entered. From the flames, shadowy figures emerged, holding hands, dancing around the melting fleshy mass, singing in a language I didn't understand to an eerie melody. The fire blazed more fiercely, and I vaguely saw the shadow of a gaunt old man throwing chains, shackling the fleshy mass tightly, then dragging it into the brooch. Deep, resonant laughter echoed throughout the farm as the fleshy mass shrank and vanished. The fire continued to burn, consuming the shed and everything within it, while Hector and I just stood there, stunned, trying to comprehend what had just happened to us throughout a long, long night. As the sun rose, we stood on Mrs. Morris's porch. Elane had fainted during the ordeal, and Sam was still unconscious. Hector and I sat in silence until the fire subsided to embers. In the ashes, the brooch, once blue, was now a frightening black and red swirl. Mrs. Morris had been awake, waiting for Sam on the porch all night, crying tears of joy when she saw Hector carrying Sam on his back. Sam woke up a few hours later, texting me to ask if she could use this experience for her new script. I gave her permission, knowing she would never claim it was a true story, and even if she did, no one would believe it. The whole story was too incredible. We showed the brooch to Mrs. Morris after everything Peter had done, so she could witness his end, which was fitting. Hector promised to take the brooch to court in hell as evidence for good conduct to reduce his community service hours, then return it to her. Unfortunately, we couldn't salvage any bodies from the fire afterward. That meant their friends and family would never get complete closure. But in a way, perhaps that was better. They didn't have to witness the blasphemous state Peter had reduced their loved ones' bodies to. I wouldn't be surprised if this makes up for all the illegal stuff I've ever done, Hector said, closing Peter's car trunk. He casually stole the car after the incident, saying the nearest portal to hell was a few miles from my parents' town, and he needed a car to get there. I basically just saved the world from a demon. The court will surely have to take that into account, maybe even promote me to an angel or something. I did almost all the work, after all. I glared. I was kidnapped for most of the night. Yeah. Hector brushed his hands on his jeans. Anyway, the court will be impressed, maybe even give me a vacation to come visit. Oh, come on, every time you come up here, something crazy happens to me. I don't want any more broken bones for Christmas. I laughed, waving my hand. To be fair, you almost killed me. That amulet doesn't distinguish between good and bad demons. That was an act. I had no other way to escape. I wasn't actually going to throw it at you. You didn't need to threaten me like that. We just needed to throw it at him and run, that's it. And that Elane almost killed you too, you know. She didn't know anything, I shrugged. After everything, she apologized profusely for almost killing us and even offered to pay all my medical bills for my wrist. But with all she had been through, I told her to keep the money and go to therapy instead. She moved out of town almost immediately. Their house and the land where Peter's farm was built were also put up for sale. Unlike Sam, Elane left no contact information, and that was fine. Even though I saved her, she still hit me over the head with a baseball bat to make it easier for her fleshy demon fiancé to drag me away. So calling her a close friend might be an overstatement. Well, anyway, you and I are similar in this regard. Hector stretched his neck. All these life-or-death situations around you are exhausting. You need a vacation, I smirked. Give me my vacation back then. Because of this, I had to take extra time off from school to recover. 1 week at home was clearly not enough. My professors were understanding. When I emailed to explain, I fell down the stairs and broke my arm. The story couldn't be further from the truth, but at least it bought me more time to study for my final exams. Thank God, because I couldn't concentrate on studying with the shadow of death looming over my head. Since Peter was sealed, Hector informed me that my lifespan had returned to normal. According to the book, he still wouldn't tell me exactly how long I had to live. Hector chuckled, sliding into the driver's seat, slamming the door shut. He was visibly excited to have a car. At least someone was happy. I wasn't even sure if he had a real driver's license. He rolled down the window, reaching out for a high five. I returned it. No tearful goodbyes, but I'll be back soon. Next time you come home, it's KFC, all right. Take your time, you know where to find me. Slowly dying in my apartment. Exactly, see you there. This time, we both knew this wasn't a true goodbye. Even though we met under unusual circumstances, and our relationship was built primarily through even stranger events, I still considered Hector a friend. The kind of friend you only see occasionally, but each time you meet, it's easy to pick up right where you left off, as if no time had passed. In the end, it truly was a crazy trip. I hallucinated more than normal, falsely accused an old woman of being a voodoo witch, befriended her eccentric granddaughter, met my old stalker's sister, sealed away a mad scientist, and convinced my mom that I broke my arm from an unlucky fall, not from fighting. This was a roller coaster ride I didn't want to get on again for a very long time.